The protagonist of this story had only one desire in life: to reach the very peak of martial arts. But as time went on, he realized that even if he spent his entire life training, it would never be enough to achieve his dream. He simply wasn't destined to reach the summit of martial mastery. Still, because of his deep desperation, he refused to give up. He decided to chase an ancient legend. A tale from long ago about a divine dragon that guarded a golden fruit said to grant immortality to whoever consumed it. After a fierce and deadly battle against the divine dragon guardian, he finally reached the sacred place where the legendary fruit was said to grow. He could hardly believe it. The golden fruit of legend was real. Its radiant golden light illuminated the surroundings, exuding a mysterious divine aura. Exhausted from the long fight, he sat atop the corpse of the slain divine dragon, his eyes fixed on the glowing fruit. After catching his breath, he slowly stood and approached the tree. Confidence filled his chest. With this fruit, he believed, he could finally reach the peak of martial arts that he had dreamed of all his life. Without hesitation, he plucked the golden fruit and began to eat it. The moment he swallowed, a strange and powerful energy surged through his body. His veins throbbed, his blood boiled, and his entire being trembled as if being reforged by divine power. It was then revealed that this man's name was Gilphus L. Dragon, the one hailed as the strongest human in the entire world. But decades later, Gilphus L. Dragon had grown old. Now lying weakly on his bed, he was surrounded by his children and grandchildren. They whispered that his time was near and that they must accept that he would soon pass away. His eldest son, Gilliam, held his father's hand tightly. Gilphus, the current head of the L. Dragon family, told his son that he didn't want to see sadness on their faces, that his time had simply come. Gilliam forced a smile, his voice trembling as he said that the manor had already grown gloomy when their mother passed away, and it would be even lonelier once their father was gone. But Gilphus gently reminded him not to let weakness consume him, not to be swallowed by grief. Then, as silence filled the room, Gilphus thought back to the golden fruit. He admitted to himself that in the end, perhaps no one could truly believe in the myths of the ancient world. Yet he still felt fortunate, for he had lived long enough to have a family of his own. He told his loved ones that he had lived a long and fulfilling life, and that he had no regrets, but deep inside he knew it was a lie. Even now, he still couldn't let go of his dream. If only he had more time, he would continue to pursue the peak of martial arts, the dream that had eluded him all his life. And so, in his final moments, he held onto that desire until his last breath. However, in a completely unexpected twist, Gilphus opened his eyes once again. Confused, he wondered if he had merely fallen asleep. Everything felt strange. His room was different. His body felt light, and his surroundings unfamiliar. When he finally looked at his hands, his eyes widened in disbelief. "These aren't my hands. Am I a baby?" He quickly realized he was in a bizarre situation. But as a 10-star level martial artist, he questioned how anyone could have done this to him without him noticing. Then, a thought struck him. The divine dragon and the golden fruit. He finally understood. The fruit's effect wasn't immortality, but reincarnation. Though unexpected, the realization filled him with joy. He had been granted another chance, a second life, to reach the peak he failed to attain before. Soon he noticed he wasn't alone in the room. When he looked around, he realized he was inside the annex of the L. Dragon Manor. Somehow, he had been reborn into the same family. He then noticed that the room was filled with other infants. Just as he was wondering why there were so many babies here, a group of maids entered, carrying baby bottles. But strangely, instead of milk, they carried a red liquid. Gilphus watched as the maids poured the crimson substance into the bottles. He thought they were about to feed the infants, but suddenly, one of the maids carried out a goblin. They forced the bottle into the goblin's mouth. Moments later, the goblin began to tremble violently. A red light burst from its body, and then it exploded into a shower of blood, splattering across the room. Gilphus froze in shock. Fear and confusion filled his mind. What in the world is happening here? One of the maids calmly said that the mixture would be safe if they adjusted the right amount of water. As they began feeding the red liquid to the other infants, another maid picked up Gilphus himself. He looked at the bottle and immediately realized it wasn't milk. The energy coming from it was terrifyingly strong. He could sense that the liquid was dragon blood, and that it was far too dangerous for a newborn's fragile body. But before he could react, the maid pushed the bottle into his mouth. Instinctively, like any infant, he began to drink. Instantly, immense power surged through his veins. His small body trembled from the pain, but Gilphus recognized it. The blood of ancient dragons was coursing through him. He thought, "This is dangerous, but maybe this is also an opportunity." At first, he considered stopping, but then he realized, if he could absorb this power, He might surpass even his former self. He might finally reach the true summit of martial arts. With fierce determination, he continued drinking the dragon's blood. His veins bulged, his body convulsed in agony, but his will remained unbroken. "Don't underestimate me," he thought. "I am Gilfus Eldragon." He repeated the words in his mind like a mantra, enduring the pain until miraculously, he overcame it. The maid stared in disbelief as he continued to drink, surviving what should have been a death sentence. Within his tiny body, two colossal dragon energies clashed violently, battling for dominance. When one finally overpowered the other, Gilfus could hardly believe how easily he had absorbed the power. When the two dragon forces finally merged within him, he realized this was the perfect opportunity. After finishing the last drop, he couldn't believe he had survived the overwhelming pain. His body hadn't exploded. Instead, it had adapted. He noticed a few other infants had also survived, which made him smirk inwardly. So, he thought, never underestimate the survival instincts of a newborn. But as expected from a baby's body, exhaustion soon overcame him. His eyelids grew heavy, and despite his triumph, Gilfus Eldragon, the strongest human reborn, slowly drifted into sleep. After 7 years, he was now undergoing intense physical training. While doing one-handed push-ups, a massive boulder was balanced on his feet. When he finally reached his 1,000th count, he kicked the boulder upward, and as it came crashing down onto his back, Gilfus couldn't believe the strength his body now possessed. Gilfus Eldragon, the former family head of the Eldragon clan, now lived under a new name, Zeke Eldragon. Zeke thought about how he had achieved such physical power at a young age, realizing it was all thanks to the ancient dragon blood flowing in his veins. It was said that every being in this world possessed something called a source of power, but the ancient dragon blood that had been given to them as infants contained a tremendous amount of that power. Those who survived drinking it developed bodies far stronger than ordinary humans. With the divine dragon source of power within him, Zeke knew he had already surpassed the limits he reached at the same age in his past life. And since he was the only infant who had managed to drink an entire bottle of ancient dragon blood, his body underwent a drastic transformation, one even he did not expect. Yet despite his progress, what frustrated him most was that he remained a mere 1 star. He had trained relentlessly, expecting to reach at least 4 stars by now. The star was the measure of one's source power. In this world, the human body was said to resemble a universe. The more stars one had floating within that inner universe, the stronger they became. However, as the number of stars increased, so too did the difficulty of reaching the next level. In his past life as Gilfus Eldragon, Zeke had achieved the unimaginable, 10 stars. He was the only person in the world to ever reach such a level. "Time really flies," Zeke muttered. He was now 7 years old. We learned that he was an illegitimate child of the current Eldragon family head. His mother had died when he was still an infant, and to this day he had never even seen his father's face, something he considered deeply irresponsible. What shocked him most was the realization that 1,000 years had already passed since his reincarnation. He thought that reincarnation itself was already unbelievable. But after 1,000 years, the world had changed. It had become a true survival of the fittest era. The greatest proof of this was the practice of feeding infants the blood of ancient dragons, followed by a ritual known as the Dragon Trial. Only those who survived both the drinking of dragon blood and the Dragon Trial were deemed worthy to receive education and training as Eldragon warriors. Naturally, Zeke should have been one of them. Yet, whenever he asked the servant assigned to take care of him why no instructor had ever been sent to train him, the servant would only say that he wasn't allowed to answer such questions. Even after turning 7, Zeke had never received a single lesson. "Isn't that strange?" Zeke wondered aloud. Every child who survived the Dragon Trial was supposed to begin combat training. Everyone except him. Day after day, he lived alone with only a servant by his side. When he confronted the servant about it, the servant merely asked what was wrong with that arrangement. Zeke sighed and said that for now, conditioning his body was more important than combat training anyway. After all, he could teach himself if he wanted to. He had once been a 10-star warrior in his past life. Zeke then requested information about the other surviving infants or anything about the main family that could help him. But once again, the servant refused, saying she wasn't permitted to disclose such information. Frustration clouded Zeke's face. "Will you always refuse to answer me?" he asked sharply. The servant's firm and repeated that she couldn't speak of such matters. "Isn't it cruel?" Zeke asked bitterly. "Treating me like this?" But the servant explained that he was only following orders, her duty being to attend to Zeke's daily needs, nothing more. The servant, a 3-star level practitioner, could have easily taught Zeke basic combat techniques. Yet Zeke had no interest in such trivial lessons. After 7 years of living with this maid, he had grown used to the same lifeless responses. Finally, Zeke decided to leave and head into the forest. The servant said nothing, merely watching as Zeke walked away. So, she's really going to let me go? Zeke thought, a hint of irritation in his tone. Deep in the forest, Zeke uprooted wild poisonous herbs and ate them without hesitation. As before, the taste was vile, but this was part of his training method. Then suddenly he noticed something. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm as he repeated to himself, "Be patient, be patient." He could feel someone, or something, watching him from afar, observing his every move. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the presence. After a few moments, Zeke sighed. "They followed me all the way here, huh?" When he could no longer stand it, he called out, "You might as well come out if you've got something to say." Then he moved into the tall grass, hiding himself. Moments later, while crouched in the grass, Zeke sensed a dark, oppressive aura nearby. When he looked toward the source, he saw a creature known as an anger boar. What is that aura? He wondered. The black mist surrounding the beast was something he had never seen before, not even 1,000 years ago. As the anger boar grazed on the grass, Zeke suddenly stood and revealed himself, startling the beast. It charged at him immediately, and rather than fear, a smile formed on Zeke's face. He was genuinely thrilled to fight it. The boar lunged forward, but Zeke swiftly dodged, gathering golden energy into his fist. With a powerful strike, he unleashed an explosion that tore through the anger boar's body. He couldn't help but grin at the sight. His attack had been far stronger than he expected. Even as a 1-star, his power surpassed that of most practitioners at the same level. Hoisting the slain creature over his shoulder, Zeke muttered, "It'll be even better once I raise my star level." He was tired of 7 years of being ignored and isolated by the Eldragon family. He wondered if it was time to leave and travel on his own, maybe even venture toward the ocean. Meanwhile, in the distance, a cloaked man watched from the shadows. "What's going on with that boy?" he muttered. Even without formal training, he's reached 1-star level, and he killed that anger boar with a single strike. What puzzled the man even more was how Zeke managed to sense his presence. "That child isn't ordinary," he said quietly. He recalled that Zeke's mother had died young, and his father, the current family head, had shown no interest in him. Without proper guidance, the boy shouldn't have grown this strong. Still, as the son, illegitimate or not, of the Eldragon head, Zeke was bound to remain under the clan's watch. That was why someone like him had been assigned to monitor the boy from the shadows. An illegitimate son, yet the blood of the family head runs through his veins, the man whispered. Could that be why he's so strong? Uncertain, he chuckled softly. That kid will be interesting to watch in the future. Then, he disappeared into the darkness. Back at Zeke's home, the boy was packing his belongings, ready to set off on his journey. But suddenly, he sensed several powerful presences outside. 3 4-star practitioners and 1 5-star. What are they doing here? He thought, stepping quietly to the door to listen. From their conversation, he heard them talking about how fresh and clean the air was in such a remote place, and how peaceful it was since there were no nearby rifts. Hearing this, Zeke concluded that they weren't assassins. They didn't sound like bad people at all. Deciding to confront them directly, he opened his door and asked, "What business do you have here?" The group froze in surprise. Then Zeke noticed the emblem embroidered on their clothing, the mark of the Eldragon clan. "Eldragon?" he muttered under his breath, wondering what they wanted from him. The men quickly bowed. "It's an honor to finally meet you, young Master Zeke," their leader said. "We've been sent to escort you to the site of your examination." "Examination?" Zeke frowned in confusion. Annoyance flickered across his face. "They expect me to take an exam," he muttered, "even though they haven't taught me a damn thing yet." And after a few days, Zeke could hardly believe that he had returned once again to the main estate of the Eldragon family. He told us that he wasn't brought here to live again within the main estate, but rather for another purpose. Before he could enter, they instructed him to change out of his dirty clothes first. Zeke then began to explain about something known as the Dragon's Nest. After 1,000 years, the Eldragon family had established a school that served all branches of their bloodline. Everyone born with any relation or connection to the Eldragon family dreamed of entering this so-called Dragon's Nest to receive proper education once they turned 7 years old. And today marked the day of the entrance ceremony for that academy. Zeke was here to take part in the entrance exam. Even though he hadn't learned anything about the modern generation of his family, taking the exam was mandatory. Zeke immediately felt disheartened when he realized that this was the true reason they had brought him here. Why now, he thought, when he had already decided to leave and travel the world? While sitting by the school gate, a boy from Ortiscale village approached him. It was Rangus, who asked if he was all right and what seemed to be bothering him. When Zeke asked who he was, the boy formally introduced himself as Rangus and said he had approached because Zeke looked troubled. "Is that so?" Zeke replied casually. After observing the flow of energy in Rangus's body, Zeke quietly thought to himself that the boy seemed shy, but had an unusually strong sense of perception. Zeke then apologized for his situation, introducing himself in return, and admitting that his mind was in turmoil because he had no idea what they would be required to do in the exam. "Is that all?" said Rangus, feeling slightly nervous at the mention of the test. Still, he explained that the annual entrance exam for the Dragon's Nest didn't really change much. But when Zeke admitted he knew nothing about the exam, Rangus was shocked. Taking the test without any knowledge at all. Wasn't that far too reckless and dangerous? Just as Rangus was about to explain the details of the exam, a loud and arrogant voice suddenly interrupted them. A boastful boy shouted and called Rangus a weakling. Rangus turned around in shock and immediately recognized who it was. It was Retin, also from Ortiscale Village. Mocking him, Retin asked why he was here, suggesting that he must have gotten lost to end up at the Dragon's Nest. He even told him it would be better to go home before he got hurt. "I'm here to take the entrance exam," Rangus replied, though his voice trembled as Retin drew closer, asking if he was seriously going to take the test. Retin clutched his stomach and burst out laughing, saying it was impossible for him to pass. He even insulted Rangus's father, saying, "Your father's a pseudo-dragon, right? What could the son of a pseudo-dragon possibly accomplish?" Rangus's fists trembled as he held back his anger. But Zeke noticed everything. Then it was explained to us that the Eldragon family followed an absolute hierarchy. The ranks were as follows: novice whelp dragons, regular soldier child dragons, captain-level adult dragons, executive elder dragons, also known as elders, and at the very bottom were the pseudo-dragons. Those who had failed to enter or graduate from the Dragon's Nest, considered immature and incomplete dragons. Yet Rangus had long dreamed of proving that even if they were called pseudo-dragons, they were still dragons nonetheless. Zeke was surprised and asked why Retin was so sure Rangus would fail the exam even before it started. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Retin snapped, asking if Zeke had a problem with him. Zeke calmly said he was merely curious why Retin was so confident Rangus couldn't pass. Retin pointed at Rangus and shouted that the reason was obvious. He was just a weakling. Zeke tilted his head and asked if he really said Rangus was weak, because from what he could sense, Rangus seemed even stronger than them. Hearing that, Rangus's eyes widened in disbelief. It was the first time someone had stood up for him. The arrogant boys grew angry and asked if Zeke was seriously claiming they were weaker than a pseudo-dragon, a being they saw as inferior. But before things could escalate, a man arrived and drew everyone's attention. He was the adult dragon examiner, announcing that the Dragon's Nest entrance exam was about to begin, and that all participants should register to receive their numbers. As Retin left, he glared at Zeke and warned that he wouldn't forget his face. Zeke sighed and said there was no need for anger, remarking that the children of this generation seemed to have such short tempers. Rangus quickly replied that wasn't that strange, since they were about the same age. Rangus added that anyone would be angry if told they were weaker than him. "Is that so?" Zeke muttered lightly. Since the entrance exam was mandatory, they had no choice but to take it. Though Zeke was surprised when Rangus said it was actually possible to skip the test. Zeke's eyes widened, and Rangus realized Zeke truly didn't know anything about it. Rangus advised him that it might be better to withdraw now before he got hurt. But Zeke replied confidently that a genius like him would never withdraw from a challenge. Rangus could only shake his head and say that Zeke was overly confident despite knowing nothing about the exam. Zeke simply laughed and said that whatever the test may be, they should hurry since it was about to start. Rangus had no choice but to agree. When they arrived at the testing grounds, the examiner announced that the exam was simple. To pass, they only needed to scratch the stones placed behind him. However, no other weapons were allowed except those provided by the academy. Still, they were free to use their bare hands if they wished, but each participant only had 3 attempts. "That's it?" Zeke said, sounding unimpressed. After surviving the dragon trial when they were still infants, he expected something far more terrifying and intense. But this seemed disappointingly simple. The examiner then called the first participant and instructed him to begin. The boy, nervous but determined, struck the massive stone with all his strength. The sound of metal clashing against rock echoed loudly, ringing in their ears. But to everyone's shock, the boy's sword snapped in half, and the recoil shattered his arm. Zeke was stunned at what he saw. As the boy writhed in pain, the examiner calmly said that he still had 2 remaining attempts, and asked if he wished to continue. But since the boy could no longer stand, the examiner declared him failed and ordered the others to clean up the area. As the injured participant was dragged away, The next number was called. Rangus trembled in fear at what he witnessed, while Zeke grew annoyed. "So this is what they call an exam?" he muttered. He then asked what kind of stones they were using. It was explained that the stones possessed regenerative properties. Any scratches would vanish in an instant. Moreover, they could reflect physical force 100-fold when struck with power. Zeke immediately said that such materials were far too excessive for an entrance exam. But Rangus explained that it was still possible to scratch them if one could properly circulate their source power throughout their entire body before attacking. "I see," Zeke said. He realized that the circulation of source power was far more important than martial arts skills in this exam. After glancing at the other participants, he thought that only a few would be able to pass, including those arrogant boys. As the exam continued, more and more failed than passed. Many were injured badly due to the stone's ability to reflect ordinary physical attacks. Then, after a few moments, the examiner called out Zeke's number. "It's my turn," Zeke said with a calm smile. Rangus, still nervous, asked if he really had no intention of withdrawing. But Zeke simply walked forward, telling him not to worry. As he approached the examiner, the man's eyes widened in shock. Zeke's aura began to flare up, faintly revealing the might from his previous life as Gilphus. The examiner told him to step forward and choose a weapon, but Zeke said it wasn't necessary. His fists alone would be enough. The crowd murmured in disbelief. No matter how skilled he might be in circulating source power, they thought, there was no way he could scratch the stone with his bare hands. His fists would surely shatter instead. Some of them said that not only Zeke's fists, but also his arms would be destroyed, which made Rangus extremely nervous for him. Along with his fear came anger toward himself, thinking he should have forcibly stopped Zeke to prevent him from getting hurt. The examiner then gave the signal to begin. As Zeke approached the massive stone, he placed his hand on it, noting that this was the first time he had ever seen such a material. He thought to himself that it must have been formed over 1,000 years ago. And even now, there were still many things about the current generation that he didn't fully understand. But that didn't matter anymore. He immediately gathered his source power into his fist. While Rangus trembled with anxiety about what might happen to Zeke, our protagonist was actually filled with excitement, because for the first time, he could use his full strength. He decided to use the mysterious stone to measure his current power. Rangus's eyes widened once more as Zeke unleashed the first form of the Dragon Destruction combat technique, Burst Strike, against the stone. A tremendous surge of energy erupted from the impact. Fragments of the shattered rock flew everywhere, and the violent wind from the blast sent dust and debris swirling through the air. In awe yet on guard, Rangus quickly shielded himself from the aftermath, while the examiner's eyes widened in disbelief at what he had just witnessed. As the dust began to settle, Zeke stood there with a smile on his face, remarking that the technique he used still seemed too much for his current strength. Despite the severe injuries to his hand, he laughed at himself, realizing he still needed much more intense training. The other participants were speechless at what they had seen. Retin looked both shocked and annoyed that Zeke had destroyed the enchanted stone. A woman watching commented that Zeke was truly interesting. While the others still couldn't get over what had happened, Zeke waited happily for the examiner to announce the results. But the examiner was still in shock. The stone Zeke had destroyed was known to regenerate itself, and the only ones capable of breaking it were supposed to be those who had already reached the 4-star level or higher. Yet now, a mere child stood before him, having done what seemed impossible. "He's just an illegitimate son," the examiner muttered to himself, then wondered if Zeke's ability came from the blood of the family head that still flowed within him. He also realized that the technique Zeke used seemed strangely familiar. Still dazed, the examiner didn't respond right away, so Zeke called out to him impatiently, asking for the result. Snapping back to his senses, the examiner finally declared that Zeke had passed the test. One of the examiners then handed Zeke a small bottle containing a green liquid. Curious, Zeke asked what it was, but the man only asked if he could leave already since Zeke was blocking the area. Annoyed, Zeke frowned and muttered if everyone in this generation was this rude. Before he could complain further, Rangus ran up to him with excitement, praising Zeke's performance. Zeke proudly grinned and said it was nothing but peanuts. Zeke then asked what the liquid was, and Rangus explained that it was a healing potion, the standard potion of the Eldragon family. "Healing potion?" Zeke repeated. Rangus confirmed it, but since Zeke was an illegitimate son of the family, he suspected it might be poison. However, since Rangus had vouched for it, he wondered if it might actually be a spiritual medicine. The elixir, known as Cloud-Piercing Clarity Wood, was made from extremely rare materials, herbs found only in secret realms, along with the pure source power of divine beasts and the essence of elusive phantom beasts. When used, it could heal not only fresh wounds but also old scars and injuries. On top of that, it could enhance one's source power. Because the ingredients were so rare and the process so complex, such elixirs were rarely seen. After drinking it, Zeke was amazed by its immediate effect on his body. "Is this really a spirit medicine?" he asked Rangus. Rangus replied that he didn't know what spirit medicine meant, but he was certain that the Eldragon family's potions were of far higher quality than any commercial ones outside their domain. Rangus then asked if the potion's effect surprised Zeke that much. "Of course," Zeke said, explaining that it healed both his serious injuries and the strain from his training. Still, he noticed that unlike spirit medicine, it didn't seem to boost his source power. Rangus, on the other hand, said he was even more amazed by Zeke himself, to which Zeke chuckled and told him not to joke. Zeke thought to himself that the potion's existence showed how far knowledge had advanced over the last 1,000 years. Rangus praised Zeke's strength again, and Zeke declared that his dream was to become the strongest of all. Soon, the examiner announced that Retin had also passed the test, as well as his companions. Zeke expected as much, but then Rangus trembled nervously when his number was called. Despite his fear, he gathered his courage and walked to the front. Watching his stiff movements, Zeke wondered why Rangus was so nervous, then shouted to encourage him, telling him to trust himself. Embarrassed, Rangus asked him to lower his voice. When Rangus chose a sword as his weapon, Zeke watched closely, wondering what he was doing. Once the examiner gave the signal, Rangus attacked the stone, but as he expected, he failed on his first try. Determined, he stood again for another attempt, but his strike bounced off the stone, causing him to lose his balance and fall. His hands trembled from the stone's reflective ability. Retin and his group burst into laughter, saying it was just as they expected. The son of a pseudo-dragon was nothing more than a pseudo-dragon himself. They mocked him, telling him to give up. Retin even sneered at Zeke, asking if this was the same man he claimed could pass, and if Rangus was truly stronger than them. Zeke stayed silent for a moment, then told them to stop spouting nonsense. The examiner informed Rangus that he only had one attempt left, and asked if he still wanted to continue. Rangus couldn't answer. Overwhelmed by embarrassment and the ridicule of others, he lowered his head. But then Zeke walked up to him and asked what he was doing. He questioned why Rangus was using a sword instead of a spear, why he would choose a weapon that didn't suit him, and why he would take a test without any plan at all. Retin watched mockingly as Zeke told Rangus that in his current condition, he wouldn't even scratch the stone no matter how many times he tried. Retin and his group laughed again, calling Zeke an idiot, reminding him that Rangus knew nothing about using a spear. His weak father only ever taught him swordsmanship, they said, and switching weapons now wouldn't change the outcome. But Zeke ignored their jeers and called out to the examiner, asking if it was against the rules to change weapons. The examiner said it wasn't. "Then Rangus is lucky," Zeke said with a grin. He turned to Rangus and asked if he trusted him. Memories of all the humiliation he and his father had suffered flashed through Rangus's mind. Gritting his teeth, he stood tall and said he would trust Zeke. He would fight with a spear just as Zeke told him to. Rangus told us that his father never managed to enter the dragon's nest. Because of that, people called him a pseudo-dragon and laughed at him. But despite all the humiliation, his father endured everything just to raise Rangus properly. That's why Rangus swore to prove to everyone that he, Rangus, the son raised with care by his father, is also a true dragon. He stood up once more, gripping the spear tightly in his hands, and declared that today, he would prove that neither he nor his father were fake dragons. He also realized that if he tried again with a sword, the result would only be the same as before. So this time he decided to trust Zeke completely. The only problem was that he didn't know how to use a spear. Zeke called out to him, and as he pointed toward the enchanted stone, he told Rangus that there was nothing else he needed to do. Just thrust the spear straight into the stone without thinking about anything else. "Just pierce it straight through," Zeke said firmly. Rangus tightened his grip on the spear. He knew that under normal circumstances, stabbing the stone directly wouldn't cause even the slightest damage, especially since it had a strong regeneration element. But Zeke was the first person to ever stand up for him, even though they had just met that very day. It was something new and unfamiliar to him, but because of that, he chose to place his full trust in Zeke and believe in his own strength this time. He gathered his source power into the spear and immediately noticed something strange. For years, he had wielded a sword, yet he had never managed to wrap it in this much source energy, something he was now effortlessly doing with the spear. With a determined shout, Rangus unleashed his full power and struck the stone with everything he had. Retin nearly died laughing, saying exactly what he had predicted, that changing weapons wouldn't help him pass the test. But Rangus didn't stop. He felt something different, something powerful. The spear in his hands felt like an extension of his own body. Then, as he drove the weapon forward with all his strength, The spear pierced through the enchanted stone completely. The shock on Retten's face and those of his companions was priceless. Even the examiners couldn't hide their astonishment, delighted by what they had just witnessed. Rangas hadn't just scratched the stone. He had pierced straight through it. Zeke immediately praised him, while Rangas himself could hardly believe what he'd done. Even after the examiner officially declared that he had passed, Rangas still asked in disbelief if he had really succeeded. Zeke smiled, wrapped an arm around his shoulder, and confirmed it. Overwhelmed with joy, Rangas nearly cried as he hugged Zeke tightly, shouting over and over that he had done it, that he had passed the test. Retten's group, however, refused to believe it. They called it luck, but Retten himself stayed silent, shaking with rage. He couldn't accept that. Just as Zeke had said, Rangas was actually stronger than them, and that his result was far better. The examiner then announced that the test had officially ended. Afterward, he declared that the entrance ceremony would begin shortly. Zeke immediately asked if the test was truly over. Rangas replied that it seemed so, but added that there would probably be more tests once they entered the dragon's nest. Soon, a group of men emerged from a dark hallway. When they stepped into the light, the examiner announced that the head of the Eldragon family would now deliver a speech to congratulate those who passed. The moment Zeke saw the man, he asked who the person with the cold, dark expression was. Rangas, clearly nervous, replied that it was the family head himself. "That's the family head?" Zeke said. "Why does he look like that? He's not even smiling. He looks colder than ice." Rangas immediately covered Zeke's mouth, whispering that it would be best if he stayed quiet, repeating his plea for him to stop talking. Zeke nodded. When he looked again at the group, he remarked that these people represented the current power of the Eldragon family. Some of them were at the 7-star level, while others were 6-star. To Zeke, their strength was impressive, especially since the current family head, Balza Eldragon, was an 8-star level powerhouse. 1,000 years ago, only a handful of people had ever reached that level. Still, Zeke wasn't sure how many existed in this current era. "I don't like this family head," Zeke muttered. But before he could say more, Rangas tried to hush him again. Zeke sighed and thought to himself that he never expected this man to be his father in this lifetime. A dark, fiery aura radiated from Balza's body, making the entire area feel heavy. The examiner quickly ordered everyone to stay silent because Master Balza was about to speak. When Balza stepped forward, he uttered only a few words. They must all strive to become the flesh and blood of the Eldragon family. As he spoke, the terrifying pressure of his aura spread across the hall. Zeke wasn't affected, but many of the examinees trembled in fear, some struggling to breathe as their bodies froze under the immense pressure. Zeke noticed that even Rangas was affected. He couldn't believe how easily everyone around him was overwhelmed by the family head's presence. More than that, Zeke could sense an intense hatred hidden within Balza's aura. He didn't know the reason behind it, but even so, he couldn't bring himself to like the man who was supposedly his father. When Balza turned away, another man stepped forward and drew everyone's attention. He had blonde hair and cheerfully thanked Balza for his words. He then said that Master Balza had high expectations for them all, and that just like his master, he would also keep his own speech short. As Zeke wondered who this man was, the speaker simply told everyone to train hard and grow stronger. "That's it?" one of the examiners muttered. The man smiled and said that people who worry too much about small things go bald early, so he wouldn't bother with long speeches. Zeke couldn't understand what was wrong with them, but at least the atmosphere in the hall had lightened up. The examiner then announced that the new students would now be assigned to their dormitories. Everyone whose number was called had to head there immediately. Zeke asked if they wouldn't all be staying in the same dormitory, and Rangas explained that there were 4 East, West, South, and North dorms. Every student accepted into the academy was allowed to live in one of those 4 halls. When Zeke's number was called, he stood up and waved goodbye to Rangas. He was assigned to the East Hall. As he walked through the corridor, he commented that a lot had changed in this place over the past 1,000 years. After finding his room, he said that he must have gotten lost since it took him a while to arrive, and his roommate had probably gotten there first. When he opened the door, he cheerfully greeted his new roommate and apologized for being late. He then said that from today on, they'd be sharing the same room. But to his surprise, his new roommate turned out to be none other than Rangas himself. Zeke couldn't help but laugh, saying it seemed like fate kept linking them together. He asked if there was anything else scheduled for the day, and Rangas confirmed that their training would start tomorrow. "Is that so?" Zeke said casually, prompting Rangas to ask if he hadn't listened to the examiner's earlier explanation. Zeke admitted that he hadn't, on purpose. Rangas sighed and said they should get some rest early, since training would begin the next day. As Zeke gazed out the window, he thought about his plan to escape from the Eldragon family and travel the world. But after what he'd learned about the enchanted stone with regenerative properties and the healing potion, he realized he had discovered many interesting things during the exam. If he truly wanted to understand all the changes that had taken place over the past 1,000 years, he thought, then maybe staying with the Eldragon family for a while wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. A month passed at the academy, and their training continued to grow harsher. Holding heavy dumbbells in both hands, the instructor explained that the dragon's breath he was teaching them was one of the most important techniques ever created by the 15th Eldragon family head. After reminding them that they had to master the technique under any condition, the instructor's attention was drawn to a few students. Some of them, he noticed, had already mastered dragon's breath, especially the young woman he called Master Lika. Her overflowing energy suggested that she was close to reaching the 2-star level. But aside from her, one other student caught his eye, and he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Zeke was training while not only holding the dumbbells but also balancing large stones on his head and arms. The instructor stared in disbelief and muttered to himself that the blood of the family head truly ran in Zeke's veins. However, it was said that no one had ever taught Zeke anything since he was a child, which is why everything he was witnessing now felt unfamiliar to him. Zeke, on the other hand, couldn't believe that the technique he once called the Dragon King's breathing technique had been further developed by the succeeding family heads, and that it was now being taught to other branches of the family as well. According to Zeke, breathing techniques were methods that gathered the source power from the surroundings into the body. Once circulated, this source power would strengthen a person's own inner energy. The effectiveness of such techniques depended on an individual's ability and intellect. That was why the great families of this world kept their techniques secret, never allowing them to be learned by outsiders or those not belonging to their bloodline. Zeke also realized that the dragon's breath was a safe and simple technique, easy enough to master, but it was useless to him if it could only be used while resting. His own version of the breathing technique allowed him to manipulate the surrounding source power even while moving. Because of that, it was far more complex and powerful in actual combat, but also much harder to learn. Only a few had ever mastered it. He thought the current generation must have simplified his original version, so that even the family's branch members could learn it, and that decision had clearly helped strengthen the Eldragon family. Zeke couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. He never imagined that the techniques he had discovered long ago would still have an impact after 1,000 years. It made him wonder if the other martial arts techniques he created had also evolved over time. Interesting, he muttered to himself, amused by the thought. Lika, meanwhile, quietly observed Zeke from a distance. Later, in the cafeteria, the other students were astonished by how much food Zeke was eating. As he continued devouring his meal, he noticed Rangus sitting silently across from him. "What's wrong?" Zeke asked. "You won't get strong if you don't eat." Rangus simply asked if Zeke didn't find his stamina strange. "That's it?" Zeke replied. "You just need to eat more if you want to get stronger. Train harder. Push yourself." He even offered some of his food to Rangus, but the latter politely declined, saying he'd had enough. As Zeke thought about how some of the students were already well trained even before entering the academy, a girl suddenly approached them. "You're quite impressive," Lika said, her tone calm yet confident. Zeke blinked. "And who are you supposed to be?" he asked casually. Rangus immediately choked on his food, whispering nervously, "You don't know who she is? That's Master Lika, the daughter of the family head, Lord Balza." "Oh," Zeke said indifferently. "What do you want me to do about that?" "I don't know her." Rangus began sweating profusely. "You can't talk like that. Master Lika is one of the candidates to become the next family head. She's not someone you can just speak to casually." "Is that so?" Zeke replied. "Well, I'm a family head's child too." "An illegitimate one, though?" Rangus froze in shock while Lika looked at him curiously. "Is that true?" she asked. "You're really the family head's illegitimate son?" The narrator's voice continued. Lika Typhona Eldragon, one of the candidates to inherit the Eldragon family, was now standing before Zeke herself. "Why would I lie about that?" Zeke said, shrugging. Lika frowned slightly. "Then tell me, how could an illegitimate child like you destroy the magic stone with your bare hands? How could someone not from a renowned family possess such strength?" "Because I'm Zeke," he replied confidently, turning back to Rangus. "Stop staring and finish your food." Both Lika and Rangus fell silent for a moment. Then, Lika suddenly smiled. "You really are an interesting person," she said before sitting down beside him. "How about serving under me? I'll make you one of my followers." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I want you to join me," she said. "Be my ally and I'll be your backer. Every illegitimate child needs allies and influence, don't they? Use your strength to help me become the next family head. And once I do, I'll help you achieve your own dreams. Zeke didn't even hesitate. No, he said flatly. Lika frowned again. Why not? Don't tell me you want to become the family head yourself? As her aura flared with a faint, crackling energy, Zeke could tell that she was close to reaching 2-star level. For someone her age to release an aura like that, she was indeed impressive. Still, Zeke remained calm. You can think and do whatever you want, he said. But I have no interest in being family head or any kind of title. Why? Lika asked coldly. Zeke stabbed his knife into the table. Because I don't need to serve anyone, he said, his voice steady but sharp. I'm the strongest person there is. The cafeteria went silent. Even Lika couldn't believe what she was feeling. Zeke's presence had completely overwhelmed her for a moment. Rangus immediately stepped in to diffuse the tension, urging both of them to calm down. But Lika wasn't the type to back off. Embarrassed and angered by what just happened, she decided to challenge Zeke to a duel. Zeke, however, didn't seem to care and simply continued eating. Moments later, a commotion spread across the campus. Where are they going? One student asked. To the training grounds, another replied. There's going to be a duel between the younger generation. Master Lika herself is fighting. What? Master Lika from the Typhona family? Someone exclaimed. Who's brave enough to challenge her? When they arrived at the training grounds, everyone whispered among themselves, wondering who would face her. Zeke, meanwhile, couldn't believe Lika was actually serious about the duel. Are you all right with this? Rangus asked nervously. You'll be fighting Master Lika. Even if you call her master, I don't know who she is, Zeke replied bluntly. Rangus sighed. You should at least show some respect, now that I know you're also the family head's son. Do what you want, Zeke said. Still, Rangus tried to explain. What's important now is that you understand who you're up against. Master Lika isn't just anyone. She's the daughter of Lord Balza Eldragon. And she also carries the blood of the Typhona family, one of the 4 great families supporting the Eldragons. She's a prodigy who mastered all forms of the Typhona family's hereditary lightning great sword technique at a young age. Like her father's other children, she has terrifying talent. Zeke tilted his head. I didn't understand a word of that except that she's the family head's daughter. Rangus stared at him. How do you not know any of this? Because I don't, Zeke said plainly. So don't ask me. Rangus blinked as Zeke suddenly laughed. But since I don't know anything about her, he said with a grin. That'll just make the fight more fun. Sounds exciting? Rangus could only sigh in worry. No matter how strong Zeke was, Master Lika was on another level entirely. Why did you even accept her challenge? He asked. I never run from a fight, Zeke answered. And it looks like my challenger's ready anyway. At that moment, Lika stood with her sword planted firmly in the ground. Her aura flared, lightning crackling faintly around her. Are you two done talking? She asked coldly. Lika shouted, asking if they were finally done talking, and Zeke replied that he was ready. Rangus, trembling in fear and shock, immediately ran away from them, warning Zeke to be careful in their fight. Zeke then turned to Lika and asked why she was so determined to fight him. Lika explained that she wanted to become the next family head of the Eldragon family, and to achieve that, she needed to defeat Zeke and make him one of her followers. What do you mean by that? Zeke asked, wondering what his connection was to her dream of becoming the family head. Lika questioned him back, asking if he truly had no idea about the current situation of their family, and whether being an illegitimate child was the reason he was so unaware. Zeke simply answered that he didn't, admitting that his knowledge about their family was limited. Because of that, Lika began explaining. She said that including both of them, there were 5 candidates to become the next family head. Except for Zeke, all of her siblings were connected to the 4 major branch families of the Eldragon clan. The position of family head was so important that it became a source of conflict among those branches. For that reason, all of Zeke's siblings had entered the Dragon's Nest to study and represent their respective families. Since the fight for succession had turned into a fierce competition, Lika needed strong allies to stand against her older brothers. Zeke quickly understood that this was a power struggle between the 4 main branches of the Eldragon family. He found it all too complicated, and wasn't even sure if he wanted to understand it. Lika then continued, saying that as one of the candidates for family head, she needed to strengthen not only her knowledge and power, but also her influence by gathering strong followers. Without another word, she charged straight towards Zeke, declaring that she would defeat him right then and there to make him one of her subordinates. But Zeke easily dodged her powerful strike, as well as the flurry of attacks that followed. Still, Lika refused to let him escape. The onlookers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The speed of their movements was incredible. Lika's attacks, despite her heavy greatsword, flowed so smoothly and rapidly that it seemed almost effortless. As they watched the battle between the siblings, The crowd began to murmur about Lika's precise control over her source power, noting how her strikes were becoming faster and stronger over time. They could only marvel at the power of a true daughter of the family head from one of the main branches. Some even said the fight's result was already obvious. What they didn't know, however, was that Lika herself was growing increasingly frustrated. She couldn't understand how Zeke kept dodging every single one of her attacks, or why it felt like he was simply toying with her. Rangjus, who was watching from a distance, couldn't help but be amazed, his earlier worries fading away as he saw Zeke's calm movements. Zeke then remarked that the martial arts Lika was using were unlike anything he had seen before. He admitted that her movements were far faster than those of any ordinary one-star level fighter. But Lika, irritated, shouted for him to stop talking and focus on their fight. Zeke clenched his fist and said he was already focused, and that was exactly why he could unleash such a powerful strike so easily. His punch landed squarely, and Lika immediately gagged from the force. She fell to her knees, gripping her sword and stomach in pain. The spectators gasped and began whispering among themselves, wondering how Zeke managed to avoid all of Lika's attacks and who this mysterious boy truly was. As Lika struggled to stand, she asked why none of her strikes could land. Compared to other one-star fighters, she knew she was much faster. So logically, Zeke shouldn't be able to keep up. Zeke admitted that she was indeed faster than any one-star he had ever seen. But in his eyes, she was still just a one-star. "You're a one-star too," Lika snapped, saying that Zeke shouldn't be able to match her speed and movements. "There's a simple reason for that," Zeke replied. "Your breathing, the movement of your eyes, even the shift of your muscles. I can read them all. By observing these small details, I can predict your next move. It's all based on experience." "Don't make me laugh," Lika shouted, launching another fast strike toward him. But Zeke easily dodged again, saying that just like his words a moment ago, he could see and read her every move. In the next instant, he countered with another powerful attack that sent Lika crashing into the wall with a violent force. The spectators screamed in shock, asking if Lika had really been defeated. "Master Zeke, that was amazing! You beat Master Lika!" Rangjus shouted in excitement, but Zeke calmly said that it wasn't over yet. Their fight wasn't finished. As the dust cleared, Lika stood once again, bruised but defiant. Zeke noted that she had focused her source power into her core, allowing her to endure his attack without suffering serious damage. He smiled slightly and admitted that Lika was truly an extraordinary girl. "That's enough, Master Lika," Rangjus pleaded. But Zeke told him to move back, warning that he could get caught in their next exchange. Zeke then noticed an intense surge of aura flowing from Lika. He wondered if she had just advanced to the 2-star level. The spectators noticed it too. They couldn't be mistaken. The glowing mark on her body was proof that she had indeed become a 2-star with a white aura. The 2-star level was a stage where one could channel source power into their martial arts, even manifesting it outside their body as aura. Lika thanked Zeke, saying that because of him, she had achieved the 2-star level earlier than expected. "But because of that," she declared, "you no longer have any chance of winning." With her aura blazing, she charged towards Zeke, her great sword surrounded by radiant power. Zeke only laughed. He looked genuinely thrilled. "You've really improved," he said with excitement, dodging another rapid strike. "Your speed is incredible now." But his expression suddenly changed when he felt a sting on his cheek, a shallow cut. "I know I dodged that attack," Zeke thought to himself. Lika smirked and asked if he could finally see the difference in their strength. "This is my true ability," she said proudly. "Now that I've become a full 2-star and gained my aura, I'll show you the real power of the true Thunder Greatsword technique." "Oh, then I get to witness a martial art I've never seen before," Zeke said, smiling in excitement. To him, this was turning out to be the most thrilling and enjoyable moment of their fight. Lika suddenly unleashed the Lightning Greatsword technique. Lightning flash, her sword crackling with blinding golden energy as she charged forward. Zeke was instantly enveloped in a storm of lightning, forcing him to retreat a step back as he shouted, "Wait a second!" What kind of technique was that? How can you manipulate lightning like that? Isn't this too much for a sparring match? Lika smirked, driving her sword into the ground as golden light surged around her. "You seem surprised," she said calmly. Summoning another move, Lightning Net, sparks erupted from the earth, forming a glowing web of electricity that shot towards Zeke, but he narrowly dodged it. As he landed, he muttered to himself, "Her power has grown tremendously. Her strength now is nothing like before. At this rate, this fight won't be easy." The audience murmured in awe, unable to hide their astonishment. Ever since Lika had advanced to 2-star level, the tide of the battle had completely turned. Rangjus, who had been watching anxiously, began to worry. Zeke noticed that Lika's movements were simple, nothing new compared to her 1-star self. but every swing of her blade now carried far greater force. Her lightning greatsword technique was overflowing with power, her aura amplifying each strike. What surprised Zeke even more was the speed. Lika was moving faster than he could have anticipated, and her lightning felt strangely mysterious. Still, he remained confident. Even if she could cloak herself in thunder, he was sure he could counter it. Yet, curiosity filled him. What kind of power was this? What kind of lightning could she command? While evading her continuous assaults, he studied her every move, analyzing her aura and its rhythm. Lika, noticing Zeke's calm smile as he danced away from her attacks, frowned. Still smiling? "You look too relaxed for someone in a duel," she sneered. "Let's see how long that lasts." She dashed forward once more, her sword blazing with light as she used swift thunder, enveloping herself in golden lightning. But again, Zeke evaded at the last moment. She's as fast as lightning itself, he thought, only for Lika to swing her sword mid-charge. The blow struck true this time, sending Zeke flying backward with a powerful shockwave that scattered dust and debris across the field. Rangus gasped and rushed towards Zeke out of sheer panic, but one of the spectators grabbed his arm to stop him. Meanwhile, Zeke stood up, his clothes scorched but his will unshaken. Lika charged again, unleashing another lightning flash, striking him head-on. Yet Zeke still stood tall afterward. How is he still standing? Lika muttered, her brow furrowed in disbelief. Rangus ran toward them, shouting, "Master Lika, stop!" "That's enough. We've already seen your strength." But Lika snapped back coldly. "Do you not understand, Rangus? Stopping mid-battle would be an insult to Zeke." Desperate, Rangus turned to Zeke and begged, "Please, Master Zeke, surrender." "That's enough." Lika chuckled. "He's right. Judging by your condition, surrendering would be wise. If you kneel and pledge loyalty to me, I'll stop." But Zeke only smiled silently. Lika's eyes hardened. "Even as an illegitimate child, you're truly a proud Eldragon," she said with a hint of mockery. She raised her greatsword high, her aura surging. "If that's what you want, then I'll use my full strength to end this." Lightning roared from the heavens as Lika summoned her first secret art, Heaven's Thunder. A colossal surge of golden energy descended, shattering the stones beneath Zeke's feet. Thunderbolts struck his body in a storm of divine fury. Rangus cried out in terror, watching his friend's body engulfed by golden lightning, smoke rising from his charred form. Lika drove her sword into the ground, exhaled deeply, and said softly, "I'm sorry, Zeke, but this is the end." But then, a voice echoed through the crackling air. "Is that so?" In an instant, a brilliant golden lightning aura exploded skyward. Lika's eyes widened in shock as she turned around. "Impossible. How can this be? How do you have a lightning aura?" she stammered. Zeke stood, smiling calmly as golden arcs danced across his skin. "So this is what you call lightning aura," he said casually. "If you're asking how I got it, I honestly don't know." His tone was calm, but his words sent ripples through the crowd. "Impossible," Lika whispered, unable to believe what she was seeing. Zeke smirked. "Truth is, I let you hit me on purpose. I wanted to study your lightning, how it flows, how it behaves. And somehow I learned to use it myself." "That's absurd," Lika snapped. Inwardly, Zeke explained to himself that he had deliberately taken Lika's attacks because her lightning intrigued him. While enduring her strikes, he continuously activated his Dragon King's breath technique. The strange resonance between his breathing and her lightning caused golden energy to gather in his body. Before he knew it, he could manipulate the lightning himself. Maybe Lika has a unique constitution, he thought. And judging from her family's great sword technique, it's likely their whole bloodline shares this lightning affinity. Zeke walked toward her confidently. "I never expected lightning-type source power to be this incredible." This duel turned out to be the perfect training. With a grin, he added, "Thanks to you, Lika. I've reached 2-star level myself." Golden lightning flared around him as he declared, "Our battle isn't over yet." Lika roared and charged again, her greatsword glowing with power, unleashing another blinding attack. But Zeke sidestepped effortlessly and prepared a counterstrike. However, as he moved, he suddenly vanished in a flash and reappeared on the opposite end of the arena. "What just happened?" he muttered. He then realized, when one gains immense source power, it strengthens the body's muscles and nerves. This new lightning aura must have changed my physiology. I can't fully control my speed yet. In the stands, Rangus was speechless. He couldn't follow their movements anymore. Both fighters were blurs of golden light and thunder. Am I just imagining things? Or has Lika not landed a single hit lately? He wondered. Frustrated, Lika shouted, "Are you mocking me, Zeke? Stop toying with me." "I'm not," Zeke replied calmly. "But I will admit, you're a real threat." He then lunged forward, delivering a powerful kick, but Lika blocked it with her sword, the force pushing her backward. Zeke straightened, smirking. I think it's time to end this. End this? Lika repeated, narrowing her eyes. Yes, Zeke replied. I've been thinking of creating a new technique for a while now, and this seems like the perfect time. Creating a new technique? She said in disbelief. Zeke nodded. Exactly. He paused for a moment, then murmured, should I call it a first form, or maybe a special form? Lika blinked, confused. Did he even receive proper combat training? From which family could he have learned that? She wondered, her thoughts spinning. Before she could react, Zeke appeared beside her in a flash, lightning surging in his hand. Dragon Destruction Combat Arts, Special Form, Lightning Peak, he shouted. The attack struck her directly, wrapping her in a fierce storm of golden thunder. Her body trembled violently, her sword slipping from her grasp as she fell to her knees before him, electricity still crackling around her. The arena fell silent. Rangus and the others stared in disbelief. Zeke had won. Lika, lying on the ground, exhaled shakily. After a few moments, she forced herself to sit up, trembling. I can't believe I lost. I was supposed to become the next family head. I can't lose. Not to anyone, she thought bitterly. Zeke approached her, offering his hand. You were amazing, Lika. Truly strong, he said sincerely. It's always exciting to learn something new. This fight was worth it. Smiling warmly, he added, it'd be boring if this was the last time we fought. Let's have another sparring match sometime. Lika froze, her cheeks turning red as she stared at his outstretched hand. Despite her defeat, she had a feint of happiness on her face. Perhaps out of pride, or perhaps for the first time, admiration. Once again, Zeke said that they should have another sparring match soon. With a confident smile, he added that he couldn't wait for their next bout. Lika, though a bit shy, extended her hand toward him, admitting that she was no match for him, and that she willingly accepted her defeat. Meanwhile, several hours later, deep inside a dimensional rift, Balza Eldragon, the father of Lika and Zeke, and the current head of the Eldragon family, stood surrounded by countless strange and feral monsters. As the creatures charged toward him, Balza's eyes began to glow with an intense light, releasing a crushing wave of aura and dragon pressure. He instantly froze every creature in place. Drawing his sword, Balza invoked the first form, Genesis, of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts. With a single, fluid swing, all the monsters around him were cleaved cleanly in half. As he sheathed his sword, the Eldragon family soldiers rushed forward to finish off any remaining monsters that might have survived their master's strike. Balza turned toward the exit of the rift, but before he could leave, one of the soldiers called out to him, saying that he had an important report. Balza stopped walking and asked what it was about. The soldier informed him that Lady Lika had reached the 2-star level. Upon hearing this, Balza froze mid-step. His glowing eyes flickered, and his response came out cold and detached. So what of it? The soldier, clearly nervous, explained that reaching the 2-star level at only 7 years old was an extraordinary achievement. He added that with Lika's talent, once she graduated from Dragon's Nest, she would likely reach the 4-star level, or perhaps even the 5-star level. Balza's reply was chilling. Talent means nothing. The next time you report to me, I expect to hear how she can be of use to us. If all you bring are worthless updates like this, you'd better leave my sight. The soldier fell silent as Balza continued toward the rift's exit. But before he could step through, the soldier quickly added that Lika had recently lost in a sparring match. Balza stopped abruptly and turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Did she lose to one of her brothers? He asked. The soldier shook his head. No, master. She was defeated by someone her own age. By Lord Zeke. Zeke? Balza repeated, his voice low. The son of that woman? Memories surfaced, of a humble maid, Zeke's mother. That woman truly was gifted in battle, he muttered. But she died after giving birth to the boy. He turned fully to face the soldier, his tone sharp. Tell me, who could have possibly trained Zeke to defeat a 2-star cultivator? The soldier hesitated before answering. No one, master. Lord Zeke has never received formal training. He defeated Lady Lika through his own strength and skill alone. In fact, he too has already reached the 2-star level. I see, Balza said flatly. Then, turning his back once more, he declared, Begin the first trial. The soldier was visibly startled. Master Balza, forgive my intrusion, but isn't it too soon for the first trial? It's only been a month since the students began their combat training. Most of them haven't even reached the 1-star level yet. Balza cut him off. I do not care. Death chooses no timing, no level, no favorites. Only the strong deserve to survive. Star levels mean nothing if they can't endure the first trial. Those who fail aren't worthy of the Eldragon name. Yes, master, the soldier replied quickly. But then Balza added, Also, summon Freya. Tell her to return immediately. The soldier's eyes widened in disbelief. Freya. Master, do you mean that Freya? Balza nodded. Indeed. If Zeke could defeat Lika using only his own strength, then he's far more intriguing than I expected. I want Freya to design and supervise the first trial herself, and I expect her to personally observe every participant. The soldier bowed deeply. As you command, Master Balza. For the first time in a long while, a faint smile appeared on Balza's lips. A rare, almost warm expression flickered across his face as he said softly, "He's the most interesting one of all." The next day at Dragon's Nest, the students continued their combat training under Rangus. Zeke, however, was off to the side, practicing his breathing technique. Sitting in a wall-sit position, he balanced a massive boulder on his head while holding dumbbells in both hands. His unwavering focus drew the attention of Rangus and the others, who couldn't help but watch him in silence. With his eyes closed, Zeke contemplated the technique they were studying, the Strike Dragon combat arts. As he recalled, this technique was originally created by the 15th family head. Though labeled as a combat art, it was in truth a body enhancement method, simple yet well constructed, allowing even young cultivators to grasp it. Rangus called out, "Zeke, aren't you going to train?" Zeke opened one eye. "What do you mean?" "I mean combat training," Rangus clarified. "We're practicing the Strike Dragon combat arts." "I already learned that," Zeke replied casually. Rangus was stunned. "What? But it was only taught to us this morning. How could you have mastered it already?" "Because I'm me," Zeke said with a smirk. "But what's more important right now is that your source power is flowing incorrectly." "My what?" Rangus asked, confused. Zeke set down the heavy boulder from his head and told Rangus to turn around. Placing his hand on Rangus' back, Zeke channeled his aura through Rangus's body, correcting the flow of energy. "There," he said. "That's how your aura should circulate." Rangus turned to face him, grateful. "You've really mastered the Strike Dragon combat arts, haven't you?" "That's incredible!" Zeke frowned playfully. "Are you doubting me? What kind of friend are you?" "No, not at all," Rangus quickly said. "It's just, aside from my father, no one's ever taught me like that before. That's why I want to learn everything I can. You, Lord Zeke, already have your own martial arts, strong enough to defeat Lady Lika. I just thought the Strike Dragon combat arts might be too simple and boring for someone like you." "It's not boring," Zeke replied. "Actually, I admire its stability. It reminds me of my own dragon destruction combat arts, though my children never liked that technique. They said it was too difficult and complicated." The dragon destruction combat arts was indeed a complex and demanding technique, but it possessed immense power. It consisted of 4 main forms, and during his battle with Lika, Zeke had created a 5th. Beyond that, there was even a secret, its final form, a terrifying and destructive ability, the same one he had once used to slay the divine dragon in his past life. He wondered silently how his descendants had handled his other dragon techniques over time. Perhaps they had modified them. The thought only made him more excited. "Anyway," he said, "since I've already mastered the Strike Dragon combat arts, I'll continue with my physical training." He smiled faintly. Everyone has their own way of learning techniques. But before he could continue, Rangus suddenly shouted his name. "Zeke, please, teach me. I know it's a shameless request, but I want to get stronger, even just a little." Zeke looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll teach you." Rangus blinked in surprise. "Wait, you mean it? You'll really teach me?" "Of course," Zeke replied. "Why do you look so surprised?" "You were the one who asked. I just didn't think you'd agree so easily," Rangus said sheepishly. "I'm not lying," Zeke said, "and I know you're worth teaching." Just then, Lika approached them. Though hesitant, she spoke up. "Zeke, I'd like you to teach me too." Rangus turned to her, startled. "You too, Lady Lika? Is there a problem?" she asked calmly. "Honestly, I used to think that no one my age could defeat me. As a candidate to become the next head of the Eldragon family, I was confident in my power. But yesterday's match, it shattered my pride. I still don't know how you managed to use Lightning Aura, or how you wield it even better than I do." Zeke sighed. "So now this is my fault?" he muttered half-jokingly. Determined, Lika continued. "I want to become stronger. Strong enough to defeat our older brothers. And you as well, Zeke. Please. Teach me." Zeke fell silent for a moment, deep in thought. Since Zeke didn't answer right away, Lika asked if he was really fine with it, even though he was also a candidate to become the next head of the Eldragon family. Rangus agreed with her, realizing that even though Zeke was an illegitimate child, Balza Eldragon was still his father, which technically made Zeke one of the successors, whether he liked it or not. Zeke calmly replied that he didn't mind, but the real question was whether Lika's body was in good condition to train, saying that from what he saw in their match, her injuries would normally take at least a month to heal. Lika shook her head and said she had already used a healing potion, so there was no need for him to worry. Zeke and Rangus exchanged a look, whispering to each other. Zeke asked if that medicine truly had such absurd effectiveness. But Rangus replied that if Zeke was referring to the basic potion given during the entrance exam, it definitely wasn't strong enough to heal Lika's wounds so quickly. Because she was the daughter of the family head, she must have used a much stronger kind of potion. Zeke sighed in amazement, muttering that this era truly was something else. Lika nodded, admitting that without the potion, she would have been bedridden for at least a month. But now, what mattered most was her request. Whether Zeke would agree to train her as well. She knew that he, too, needed to train, but she wanted to grow stronger under his guidance. Zeke agreed without hesitation, saying that he never turned down young people with ambition. Both Lika and Rangus were surprised by his answer. Lika pointed out that he was also young like them, while Rangus added that they were about the same age. Zeke chuckled and agreed. Then, with a teasing tone, Zeke asked if she was truly sure about having him as her instructor. After all, he was the one who defeated her. Lika replied firmly that she didn't care about that. She didn't have the luxury to be picky. If she wanted to become the next head of the Eldragon family, she had to become stronger, no matter what it took. Zeke remembered how, during their first encounter, she had mentioned her dream of becoming family head. He asked why she seemed so obsessed with that goal. Without hesitation, Lika answered that if she failed to become family head, she would only be used for a political marriage. She spoke bitterly, saying that in the best-case scenario, she'd probably be forced to marry one of her cousins. But the worst case would be marrying a man she didn't even know. Zeke's expression darkened, anger flickering in his eyes as he asked what she meant by that. Lika said it was natural, considering how valuable the Eldragon bloodline was, especially within the 4 branches of the family. Their source power was special. It could be used in countless ways. That's why the family was obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure. Rangus shuddered, sensing the terrifying aura that suddenly emanated from Zeke. His voice turned cold and sharp as he said that the Eldragon family had truly begun doing disgusting things like this. He clenched his fists, saying he would destroy such filthy and meaningless traditions. But before the atmosphere could grow heavier, several instructors arrived, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Lika blinked in surprise, wondering why they had come, while Zeke muttered that the timing couldn't be worse. He worried that they might have overheard what he just said. Then, from behind them, a woman with fiery red hair appeared. One instructor stepped forward and announced that starting today, they would have a new instructor. Despite how busy this person was, she had taken the time to teach them personally, so they should be grateful. As the red-haired woman approached, she reached out her hand toward Lika and asked if she was Lady Lika. Feeling a wave of danger, Lika instinctively leaped backward. Zeke stepped forward protectively, while Rangus grabbed onto his arm in fear. The red-haired woman smiled faintly, praising Lika's sharp reaction and saying her aura quality wasn't bad at all. Zeke frowned slightly. He hadn't even sensed her presence until now. Rangus nervously asked who she was. The instructor then introduced her as Lady Freya. Freya Fewinkick of the Black Dragon Corps. Freya gave a polite smile and greeted everyone, saying she was pleased to meet them all. She then looked straight at Zeke and asked if he was Lord Zeke. When he confirmed it, she asked if he wasn't surprised by her sudden appearance. Zeke replied calmly that nothing she did was surprising. Freya froze for a moment as Zeke's eyes began to glow faintly, and he commented that her stealth technique was rather interesting. Freya quickly realized why even the family head, Balza Eldragon, was interested in this boy. Meanwhile, Zeke analyzed her movements. He noticed her source power was concentrated in her lower body, following a flow pattern he had never seen before. That must be why her footsteps made no sound at all. A spark of excitement lit up his eyes as he wondered what kind of martial arts she used. Freya then took command of the class. She confirmed that she would be their new instructor. The students began whispering among themselves in disbelief. Lady Freya, the Tempest Wind, was known as one of the strongest warriors in the family. The other instructor confirmed that Freya was a 6-star practitioner under the Black Dragon Corps, the elite unit serving directly under the family head himself. The students were in awe, unable to understand why someone of her rank would come teach at their academy. Freya smiled faintly and said she would indeed train them, but under one condition. They had to pass a simple test. The students gasped at her words. She told them not to worry. The test was simple. They just needed to bring crystal like the one she's holding, and survive for 1 full month inside the Poison Dragon Mountain. Rangus went pale at the name, while Zeke felt a sense of nostalgia. The Poison Dragon Mountain, he explained, was home to countless poisonous creatures. Even brushing against a single leaf could kill an ordinary human instantly. It was a region of pure danger. Zeke recalled how, in his previous life, he had often used that place as his personal training ground. Still, he thought this test might be too cruel for young students. Freya explained the rules. Each student would receive 1 crystal orb. If their orb broke or was lost, they would immediately be disqualified. When someone nervously asked what happened to those disqualified, Freya replied bluntly, they would be expelled from the dragon's nest. She added that they didn't need to worry about the poison itself. If they properly used the dragon's breath breathing technique, they would be fine. As long as they held onto their orbs and controlled their breathing, they could survive. Lika pointed out that aside from poisonous plants, there were monsters there too. Freya's eyes turned sharp as she said they would need to defeat those monsters themselves, since that was the only way they could secure food. Without hunting, they wouldn't last even a few days. The students were horrified. Retin muttered that it was impossible. Many doubted whether their basic combat technique, the strike dragon, could even hurt the creatures living there. Freya smirked and told them not to panic. They had 5 days to prepare. During that time, they could each choose a basic weapon art from the Eldragon family archives to learn. If they mastered it, their survival chances would improve. But if they failed to learn it within 5 days, she would not take responsibility for whatever happened in the mountain. One student asked timidly if Freya would help them in case things got too dangerous. Freya chuckled darkly, saying, "You're in the Dragon's Nest, the land of the Eldragon family. Here the weak do not last. Only the strong survive. If you can't defeat a few monsters on your own, then you might as well sleep peacefully beside them in the bed of poison." The students trembled in terror, sweat dripping down their faces. Rengis was on the verge of tears, while Lika stayed silent in deep thought. Zeke frowned to himself, wondering if this was still the same Eldragon family he once knew. It felt so different from when he had been the family head. Freya then said that was all for now. She began distributing martial arts books for every weapon type and told them to step forward to pick whichever technique they wanted to learn. As students crowded around, Rangus hesitated, unsure what to choose. Zeke advised him to take a spear technique, reminding him that he used a spear during the entrance exam. Rangus quickly agreed and thanked him. Lika said she would pick a great sword technique since she already knew the lightning greatsword's basic forms. But Zeke stopped her, suggesting she try axe arts instead. Lika asked why, and Zeke explained that it would help cover her current weaknesses. Since it was Zeke who suggested it, she didn't argue and just nodded, quietly trusting his words. Freya then asked if everyone had chosen their books. When they confirmed, she told them to make good use of the remaining 5 days. Their survival depended entirely on mastering those techniques. If they failed to do so, they would die pathetically in the Poison Dragon Mountain. Just as she was about to leave, Freya suddenly remembered something and turned back. She warned them that during the test, their seniors would be trying to steal their crystal orbs. Rangus was stunned and asked what she meant. Freya explained that their 10-year-old senior group would also be taking the same test, but their task was to hunt down and steal the orbs from the younger batch. She added that the younger students outnumbered the seniors, and since the Poison Dragon Mountain was vast, they might get lucky and avoid confrontation. Still, their seniors would use everything they had to find and attack them. After saying that, Freya turned and left. Rangus looked terrified, sweat dripping down his face as he asked what they were supposed to do now. Not only did they have to deal with poisonous monsters, but also with upperclassmen hunting them. Lika frowned and said that every upperclassman was at least 1-star level or higher. If they ganged up on her, she wouldn't last long, and most of their classmates probably wouldn't survive either. Zeke nodded, saying she had a point. If Lika couldn't fight alone, then she should form a group of 2 or 3. Cooperation wasn't forbidden after all. They could help each other hunt monsters and defend against seniors. When Rangus asked about Zeke's plan, Zeke simply said that he intended to go solo and enjoy the exam. Lika sighed and admitted that somehow that sounded just like him. Before they began training, Zeke suggested they eat first. As they walked away, Lika glanced at Rangus and asked if he didn't think Zeke was a little strange sometimes. Rangus shrugged and replied, "Yeah, sometimes." 5 days later, the students gathered before the Poison Dragon Mountain, their emotions mixed between fear and determination. Freya stood before them, a confident smile on her face, and declared that the weather was perfect for the test to begin. Nervously, Rangus said that the exam was finally about to begin. Even though this was Zeke's plan, he couldn't help but wonder if it was really okay for someone like him to be part of Lady Lika's team. After all, there were many noble-born students she could have chosen instead of him, a mere commoner who hadn't even reached 1 star yet. "We're the same, Rangus," said another student. When Rangus turned around, he recognized them as Raymond and Celine. Celine, who came from the East Hall of Dragon's Nest, admitted she was also a commoner, and couldn't believe she'd been chosen to join Lady Lika in the upcoming trial at Poison Dragon Mountain. Raymond, also from the East Hall, smiled as he looked at Lady Lika. But Lika quickly said that it didn't matter whether her teammates were nobles or commoners. She had chosen them because she recognized their potential and abilities. Hearing this, Rangus fell silent for a moment, then gripped his spear tightly and declared that he understood, and that he would do his best not to become a burden to their group. Raymond followed, saying he would give his all to meet Laika's expectations. Laika smiled brightly and said, "I'm counting on you all." Then she turned to Zeke and asked if he was truly planning to take the trial alone. Zeke nodded confidently, saying he couldn't wait for it to begin. Celine, still nervous, admitted she admired both Zeke and Laika. While she was trembling in anxiety, Zeke was brave enough to face Poison Dragon Mountain on his own. Raymond remarked that it was natural for them to be confident, since the blood of family heads flowed through their veins. But Laika quickly interjected, telling him not to compare her to Zeke, because even she felt nervous. "You're nervous?" Zeke asked. "Is there even a reason to be nervous? Aside from you, everyone here seems like a group of promising students." However, they all replied that there were plenty of reasons to be nervous about the upcoming trial. Laika then asked Zeke if he truly thought the students she picked were skilled. Zeke immediately confirmed it, and thought to himself that Laika had successfully gathered some of the most promising students in the academy. He realized that her eye for talent was indeed remarkable. He praised their group's offense and defense, saying the trial would surely be easy for them. "You're right," Rangus replied with a drop of sweat running down his cheek. "You've always been too confident, Zeke." Freya then asked if all the participants have arrived, and soon noticed that many of the students had already formed groups. Since some weren't yet masters of their weapon arts, forming teams wasn't a bad idea. Freya then stepped forward and announced that the trial would begin shortly. She explained once again that their task was to survive for 1 full month in Poison Dragon Mountain and protect their crystal orbs. They would only pass if their orbs remained intact. Every orb was identical, meaning that if one lost theirs, it could be stolen by others. Many students grew anxious upon hearing this, while Zeke realized that this meant stealing orbs from other participants was fair game. Freya continued, saying that after the new students entered the mountain and settled, upperclassmen would also enter, to steal their crystal orbs. The upperclassmen mocked them, saying that since most of the new students hadn't even reached 1 star, taking their orbs would be easy. Hearing this filled Zeke's classmates with mixed emotions: fear, excitement, and unease. Freya concluded the explanation, and as soon as she announced that the trial had officially begun, the students dashed toward Poison Dragon Mountain. Watching them go, Zeke heard Laika tell him to make sure he survived. He smiled and said he would, but that they should survive as well. Laika then called out to her team, and as Zeke told them to be careful, Freya noticed him. "It's your turn to enter, Zeke," she said. "Right," Zeke replied, apologizing for getting a bit carried away. "Carried away?" Freya asked. "Aren't you nervous at all?" "No," Zeke replied with a calm smile before walking toward the mountain. Freya watched him go, thinking to herself that he was indeed a peculiar boy. That night, at the camp outside Poison Dragon Mountain, one of the instructors asked Freya if the new students would be all right. When she asked what he meant, he said the trial seemed too early for beginners. Another instructor agreed, pointing out that most had only been in Dragon's Nest for a few months, that few had achieved even 1 star, and that they lacked real combat experience. He wondered how many would actually survive. Freya reassured them, saying there was no need to worry. Although the mountain was filled with poisonous creatures, most of them were only 1 or 2 star level beasts, not strong enough to pose serious danger. With a cheerful smile, she said the students would do fine. Then, under her breath, she whispered that she would eventually release that thing. When an instructor asked what she said, Freya simply smiled and replied, "Nothing." She then announced that it was time for the upperclassmen to begin their part of the trial. The older students immediately ran off toward the mountain, their eyes gleaming as they carried their weapons. Watching them leave, Freya murmured, "I wonder how many will survive. I can't wait to see the results." Meanwhile, inside the Poison Dragon Mountain, as the upperclassmen began their hunt, one of them spotted their first target. It was none other than Zeke, still standing motionless at the foot of the mountain. "The newbies entered the mountain long ago," one said mockingly. "Is this guy stupid or what?" Another raised his crossbow and prepared to shoot. But before the arrow could reach him, Zeke effortlessly caught it mid-air. As the upperclassmen stared in disbelief, Zeke snapped the arrow in half and said, "I've been waiting for you." One of them asked what he meant, but another shouted that it didn't matter. Didn't they see how he caught that arrow? Without wasting a second, Zeke dashed forward, his eyes sharp with excitement. "Now then," he said with a smirk, "let's play together." In the deeper part of Poison Dragon Mountain, Celine and her group were under attack by the mountain's monsters. After Celine slew a massive frog-like creature, another one suddenly leapt from behind her. Raymond swiftly raised his shield, blocking the attack and saving Celine just in time. With a powerful swing, He bashed the monster to the ground and drove his shield straight into its body, killing it instantly. Seeing that Rangus was easily defeating his own opponent, Raymond smiled in satisfaction. Lika then praised them for their excellent teamwork, and Rangus gratefully thanked her. However, his eyes widened when he saw the mountain of slain frog monsters that Lika had single-handedly defeated. Selena, impressed, remarked that Lika's power was truly on another level, just as they had expected. Raymond agreed, saying that while they were busy fighting a few monsters, Lika had already wiped out most of them by herself. Lika simply shrugged, saying it was only natural. After all, she was a 2-star warrior, and these creatures were nothing more than a warm-up for her. She also noted that since the exam had started a week ago, everyone had improved significantly, especially Celine and Raymond, who had both reached 1-star level. Celine gratefully acknowledged Lika, saying they wouldn't have advanced so quickly without her guidance, and Raymond echoed her gratitude. Rangus, however, remained silent, quietly thinking how far he'd fallen behind now that both Celine and Raymond had achieved their first stars. Celine noticed his downcast expression, and gently told him that he would surely get stronger in time and reach 1-star level too. Raymond agreed, telling him to be patient and keep working hard. Hearing their encouragement, Rangus smiled again and thanked them both. Lika then spoke, saying that Rangus had managed to defeat 3 giant frog monsters even without a star, which was truly impressive. She added that before the exam began, Rangus had trained personally with Zeke and had already perfected his spear handling, so it was only a matter of time before he became a 1-star. Moved by her faith in him, Rangus nearly teared up. As Lika looked toward the sky, she noted that night was fast approaching and told everyone they needed to head back to base. Celine agreed, warning that Poison Dragon Mountain was far too dangerous after dark. While they were on their way back, Lika suddenly stopped. Rangus immediately asked what was wrong, but Lika didn't answer. Her expression darkened as she stared ahead and demanded to know what a certain student was doing near their base. A moment later, a figure emerged from the tall grass. Rangus and the others were startled, and Celine and Raymond instinctively drew their weapons. The student stepped out with a smirk, holding his weapon loosely as he said he hadn't expected Lika to notice him so soon. Lika immediately recognized him as one of the upperclassmen and asked if he had come to steal their crystal. When he confirmed it, she realized that at last, an upperclassman had decided to attack their group, and this one was a 2-star. The upperclassman grinned, saying that their current exam required them to steal the crystals from first years, though he hadn't expected his first target to be none other than Lady Lika's group. Lika asked if he still planned to stay even after realizing whose base he had invaded. She warned him that a single upperclassman wouldn't stand a chance against her team, but the upperclassman's grin widened as his expression turned menacing. "Who said I was alone?" he replied. From the grass behind him emerged 3 more upperclassmen, all 1-star level. Their leader sneered, saying that even Lady Lika would have trouble fighting them since her teammates were nothing but burdens. Drawing his sword, he shouted for them to surrender and hand over their crystal orbs. He then charged at Lika with a powerful attack, but she evaded effortlessly and ordered Celine and the others to maintain their battle formation while she handled him. Meanwhile, Rangus, still without a star, struggled to defend against the attacks of his opponent. The upperclassman taunted him, saying it would be better to surrender and hand over his crystal. Rangus hesitated, unsure of what to do, until he remembered a conversation he once had with Zeke. Back then, Rangus had asked Zeke if there was any way for someone weaker, like him, to defeat stronger opponents. He admitted he was still starless, and worried that if stronger enemies appeared, he'd only drag his team down. Zeke's reply had shocked him. "Then you should surrender." Zeke explained that if the opponent was far stronger, 3-star or 4-star, then surrendering was the only logical choice, since a starless person could never hope to win. However, he added that if Rangus ever faced an opponent around 1-star level, there was still a chance. When Rangus asked how, Zeke simply said, "It's nothing unusual. You just have to exploit an opening." "An opening?" Rangus had asked, confused. "Exactly," Zeke replied. "If you can find and exploit an opening in your opponent's defense, you can defeat them, even if they're a 2-star. When Rangus asked how he was supposed to find such an opening, Zeke's answer was simple. Endure. Keep enduring until your opponent shows one. Rangus had been doubtful, but Zeke continued. There's no other way. You can't force an opening against someone stronger. You can only endure until they make a mistake. If you can't even do that, then defeating someone stronger will always be a fantasy for you. Zeke added, if your opponent is someone special like Lika, then you won't last long. But against an ordinary 2-star, you should be fine. He then told Rangus that confidence in his own strength was crucial, and gave him one last piece of advice. Don't overthink it. Don't think about how to create an opening or the difference in power. Just wait patiently, and when it appears, thrust your spear straight into it. Now, in the midst of battle, Rangus clenched his fists as Zeke's words echoed in his mind. Since he was weaker, he had no choice but to endure every attack and wait for the right moment. The upperclassman grew more and more frustrated as Rangus continued to withstand his blows. "Just fall down already," he shouted in anger, unleashing a powerful strike. But in that instant, Rangus saw it, the opening Zeke had spoken of. Without hesitation, he gathered all his strength and thrust his spear straight into his opponent's body. The upperclassman coughed up, collapsed, losing consciousness instantly. As he fell, a radiant light glowed on Rangus's chest, the mark of his newly awakened 1-star. Lika noticed immediately, surprised yet proud that Rangus had taken down his opponent. Meanwhile, the leader of the upperclassmen was in disbelief, unable to understand why Lika's power felt so overwhelming despite them both being 2-star level. Lika realized that ever since mastering the axe arts technique Zeke had recommended, she had learned to channel greater force and energy into her great sword, which explained the vast difference in power. She told her opponent that it was his misfortune to have chosen her group as a target. Then, summoning golden lightning around her sword, she declared, "This battle ends here." Her blade struck with blinding force, and the enemy leader fell unconscious. After ensuring the enemies were defeated, Lika rushed back to her team and asked if everyone was safe. Once confirmed, the group cheered in relief. They had just won their first battle against upperclassmen. Celine and Raymond congratulated Rangus on reaching 1-star level, and Rangus thanked them with a bright smile. Lika looked at her team proudly, realizing that now all of her members had finally manifested their first stars. With that, she said that the next battles ahead would be much easier. Then, with a thoughtful expression, she wondered aloud how Zeke was doing. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Poison Dragon Mountain, a terrified upperclassman was running for his life. Tears streamed down his face as he muttered repeatedly, "Please don't come here. Zeke, don't come here!" He cursed under his breath, trembling in fear, asking himself just what kind of monster that boy named Zeke really was. Moments later, the upperclassmen were running frantically, shouting for help, hoping and praying that Zeke would not follow them. As Zeke dragged along one of the upperclassmen he had just defeated, the others cursed in fear and confusion, asking what kind of monster or demon he was. Holding the corpse of a giant snake beast in one hand, Zeke grinned and mockingly asked what their problem was, wondering aloud if no one else wanted to play with him. The upperclassmen, now completely terrified, called him insane as they continued to flee. Some questioned why a lower-classman like Zeke was the one hunting them down when it should be the other way around. That the upperclassmen were supposed to be the hunters, not the hunted. Suddenly, one of the fleeing upperclassmen tripped and fell. As he struggled to get back on his feet, he froze. The moment he lifted his head, Zeke was already standing right in front of him. With his crimson eyes faintly glowing, Zeke sighed and said he was getting tired of chasing him. He reached out his hand, offering to help the upperclassman stand up, but calmly added that once he did, he would have to fight him. The upperclassman's eyes widened in pure horror before his body went limp, and he collapsed unconscious on the ground. Zeke tilted his head in confusion, muttering to himself and wondering what just happened to the man. He looked around and asked out loud what was going on with the upperclassmen, questioning why they had suddenly become so defensive and cowardly. Calling them pathetic, he mocked how aggressive they were the first time they saw him, only to end up running away in fear. He then smirked and shouted for the others not to leave him behind. Just then, Zeke felt a faint presence nearby. Turning toward his side, he asked whoever was watching him why they didn't come closer if they wanted a better look. When he received no reply, Zeke chuckled and said that since the observer was still watching without interfering, it must mean there was nothing wrong with what he was doing. With that, he said he would stop holding back and continue his little game with the upperclassmen. From the direction where Zeke had sensed the presence, a man emerged. It was one of the overseers monitoring the examination. Beads of sweat rolled down his cheek as he whispered to himself, unable to comprehend what kind of child Zeke was. He had witnessed Zeke defeat upperclassmen who were supposed to be far stronger than him. And even more astonishingly, Zeke had sensed his hidden presence. Realizing the gravity of what he had just seen, the overseer decided he had to report everything immediately. Meanwhile, at the camp outside Poison Dragon Mountain, Freya was taken aback when several observers arrived to make their report. According to them, it had been 1 week since the examination began. At present, 30% of the lower classmen had already dropped out, while the remaining ones were gradually adapting to both their environment and the dangers of Poison Dragon Mountain. One of the observers added that they did not expect many more lower classmen to withdraw from the test. When Freya asked about the upperclassmen, however, The observers exchanged uneasy glances and couldn't answer her directly. Freya's expression darkened, and she ordered them to speak clearly. Finally, one of them admitted that the upperclassmen were constantly fleeing. Freya frowned, momentarily lost in thought, and asked why they were running away. What exactly were they escaping from? She pointed out that, to her knowledge, there were no monsters within Poison Dragon Mountain strong enough to threaten the upperclassmen. One of the observers then explained that they were not running from a monster. They were running from Lord Zeke. Freya raised an eyebrow and asked why they would flee from him. The observer took a deep breath and said that Zeke had been relentlessly attacking and hunting the upperclassmen. At first, they tried to fight back, but eventually they had no choice but to run. Another observer spoke up, asking what kind of person Lord Zeke even was. Based on what he had seen, Zeke seemed to be enjoying himself, gleefully cutting down upperclassmen and hunting them like prey. For him, it was something completely unprecedented. A second observer nodded in agreement, saying that even though Zeke was the son of the L-Dragon family head, he was far from normal. To them, Zeke was no longer just a prodigy. He was something beyond, a true monster in human form. Freya listened quietly, then spoke with a calm but serious tone. She admitted that she had also suspected Zeke was unusual from the very beginning. Unlike the others, he had chosen to take the exam alone, and appeared completely relaxed upon entering Poison Dragon Mountain. That could only mean one thing. Zeke never planned to hide from the upperclassmen. From the very start, his intention had been to hunt them down himself. Remembering the look in Zeke's eyes when they first met, Freya couldn't help but think that the boy was indeed a monster. Suddenly, one of the observers frowned, asking what that strange sound was. Freya's lips curved into a faint smile as she said that what they were hearing was something she had been waiting for. A man then approached and asked Lady Freya where they should place the massive cage they had brought. Freya told them to leave it where it was, and thanked them for their work. When the observers turned to look at the cage, their eyes widened in shock. They immediately asked what kind of creature was inside, and some even questioned whether Freya truly intended to release it into the mountain, as the creature's aura alone revealed it to be at least a 3-star level beast. Far too powerful for any of the students to handle. But Freya, clearly pleased, reassured them that there was nothing to worry about. Adjustments had already been made to the creature. It would only target individuals of 2-star level strength or higher. Ordinary students would not suffer serious harm. One of the observers then asked why such a creature was suddenly being released during the exam. Freya replied calmly that it was a direct order from their family head, Balza. In her mind, she wanted to witness the abilities of the boy whom their soldiers had already begun calling a monster. She wanted to see whether Zeke could survive against such a being. With that thought, she ordered that the mysterious creature be released into Poison Dragon Mountain at dawn. The next morning, deep within Poison Dragon Mountain, Rangus and his team suddenly stopped in their tracks as the ground trembled violently beneath them. Lika frowned, saying she had a bad feeling about the tremor. Raymond wondered if perhaps the upperclassmen had caused it, but Rangus shook his head, saying it was most likely the work of a beast, probably a massive anger boar. Still, Lika couldn't shake off her unease and said that something about it felt different. A moment later, a second stronger quake shook the mountain. As a giant tree began to fall toward them, Lika's instincts kicked in. She shouted for everyone to move, and the group jumped aside just in time as the enormous trunk crashed down where they had been standing seconds earlier. When they turned around, Lika froze in disbelief. Celine gasped and asked what kind of creature it was, while Rangus's face went pale and sweat dripped down his temples. In a trembling voice, he said they needed to run immediately, because standing before them was a colossal golem. Meanwhile, on the other side of Poison Dragon Mountain, as Zeke sat atop a pile of monsters and upperclassmen he had defeated, he remarked that he was growing bored with the current situation of the examination. Since no more upperclassmen dared to face or challenge our protagonist, and because he could no longer sense the presence of the observers of the exam who seemed to be simply letting him do whatever he pleased, Zeke found the entire situation rather disappointing. Until suddenly, he sensed a presence from the opposite side of Poison Dragon Mountain, causing him to immediately question what kind of strange aura it was. At first, he thought it belonged to a 2-star level creature, but eventually, he realized that the presence came from a 3-star entity. He instantly wondered if 3-star monsters were truly supposed to exist within Poison Dragon Mountain. He also questioned whether the aura he sensed belonged to an unknown being that had lived within Poison Dragon Mountain for 1,000 years. Zeke then thought that all the examinees would surely struggle against a 3-star level creature, and even Lika herself would definitely not be able to handle it. He also said that the instructors should have made sure that no 3-star level creatures existed within Poison Dragon Mountain before the examination began. But after pausing in brief contemplation, he questioned whether Freya and the other instructors had intentionally allowed a 3-star creature to remain on Poison Dragon Mountain as part of the exam. He then admitted that he had no idea what the instructors were thinking. Still, he found it perfect, because it meant he would once again have an opponent to entertain himself with. Zeke also realized that the presence he sensed was far from where he currently was, and he wondered aloud why the creature did not simply appear near his location. But he stated that he couldn't just sit and wait, and because he wished to face a 3-star level monster, Zeke declared that he would go to it, and that the creature should wait for him. Meanwhile, Celine had launched an attack toward the golem, but even with the full force of her strike, it had no effect. She couldn't believe that she failed to inflict even a scratch on the golem's body. Raymond also charged in and struck the golem with his shield using all his strength, yet his attack was just as ineffective as Celine's. This prompted Lika to use her aura and lightning to attack. After noticing that the golem's arm had sustained a scratch, Lika concluded that with aura, she was able to cause damage to the golem's outer shell. In other words, only 2-star levels like her could inflict any harm, and her 1-star companions were incapable of doing so. Rangus immediately called out to Lady Lika to ask what they should do next. Lika instructed them to listen to her orders. She said that after she gained the golem's attention, they would need to seize the opportunity to escape. However, Rangus insisted that they could not do that, nor could they abandon Lady Lika to face the golem alone. Lika told them that they would only become burdens to her in the fight, and she ordered them to observe the golem's arm that she had previously attacked. She added that even with her aura, all she managed was a scratch, and that as 1-star levels, they truly lacked the ability to injure the golem. Raymond admitted that while they indeed could not injure the creature, they could still support Lika in battle, ensuring that every attack she launched would land successfully. When Lika asked what they meant, Rangus stated that he would do everything in his power not to become a burden. Selene agreed, saying that if they worked together to make sure Lady Lika's attacks hit their mark, then they would surely gain a chance to win. Because of the determination and trust her companions showed her, Lika couldn't help but smile, saying she understood what they wanted. She said she would rely on them to provide support so her attacks would land. As Lika gathered her aura and lightning into her sword, Raymond prepared to defend, while Rangus and Celine readied themselves for their offensive support. After Lika finished concentrating all her power into her sword, she instructed them to begin their renewed assault on the golem. Lika quickly advanced to the front to face the golem, but the creature immediately launched an attack toward her. Raymond used his shield to protect her, but because he was still only a 1-star level, he struggled to withstand the golem's 3-star power. Rangus and Celine dashed forward to attack the golem and draw its attention away. Meanwhile, Lika swiftly moved behind the golem to deliver her strike. She unleashed her lightning great sword technique, Heaven's Thunder, striking the golem from behind with her full strength. A powerful explosion erupted within the forest of Poison Dragon Mountain. After Lika managed to knock down the golem, and once the smoke had cleared, the damage she had caused to the forest was evident. Rangus immediately approached her to ask if she was all right, and Lika said she was fine, though she had used up all the source power in her entire body. She then asked how Raymond was doing. With Celine supporting him, Raymond replied that he was doing all right as well. But when Lika said that they should return to their base, she suddenly sensed the golem's presence again behind them. She quickly shoved Rangus away, resulting in Lika being the one seized by the golem. As the golem held her, she couldn't believe that it was still capable of moving. She realized she had grown too complacent after her attack. Celine also couldn't believe that after being hit by Lika's full power strike, the golem was still alive and able to move. Rangus immediately tried to save Lady Lika by attacking the golem with his spear, but the golem swung Lika rapidly, preventing him from landing a blow. As Rangus grew increasingly concerned for Lika, a tree suddenly came hurtling toward their direction. When the tree struck the golem, it released Lika from its grip. Rangus quickly helped her stand and move away from the creature. Lika, still confused, wondered aloud what had happened and how she managed to escape the golem's hold. Then Zeke suddenly asked what kind of situation they were dealing with. Rangus and Lika immediately recognized our protagonist upon hearing his voice. But instead of checking on Lika's condition, Zeke was far too delighted by the sight of the monster. With his eyes glowing in excitement, he immediately asked what kind of clay puppet he was looking at. Just moments before Zeke arrived at the location where he sensed the presence of the golem, he caught sight of a golden lightning aura. He immediately realized that this aura belonged to Lika, and he couldn't believe that Lika's group would be the first to encounter and clash with the monster. As Zeke continued sprinting at full speed, he said that in his previous life, he could have reached the location of the aura he sensed in an instant. But now, he could do nothing but run toward the monster's location, something he found utterly pathetic in his current state. He also thought about how Lika's group was filled with promising youngsters. Even so, their opponent was a 3-star level monster, so he had no idea how long they would be able to endure in battle. Suddenly, something came to mind, causing him to stop abruptly as he remembered a technique he had recently learned. He immediately grabbed the trunk of a huge tree, and after pulling it out from the ground, he used his physical strength along with the new technique to hurl the massive tree toward the monster. While watching the tree fly through the air, Zeke commented that the result of the new technique wasn't bad at all. He also said he didn't make a wrong decision learning it, because with his current body, he would definitely need this technique, the technique known as nurturing dragon throwing arts. According to Zeke, the basic Eldragon combat manuals were given to them as preparation for the exam. The nurturing dragon combat arts, much like the strike dragon combat arts, didn't contain battle techniques but instead basic movements and source power flow simple instructional texts. But they were perfect for him, especially since in his previous life he had been a long-range fighter possessing a body similar to melee fighters. However, he quickly realized that throwing a tree at the monster wouldn't be enough, so Zeke resumed running toward Lika's location. Rangus, still unable to believe Zeke had arrived, immediately asked if they were all right. Rangus confirmed that they were, but said that wasn't what mattered. They had a bigger problem, the golem they were fighting. Zeke's eyes glimmered as he repeated the word golem, saying so that's what the creature was called. He also said the creature was strange because he could sense its presence, yet he couldn't detect any life force within it. As the golem rose again, it immediately launched an attack toward Zeke, prompting Lika to shout an alarm, with Rangus warning that the golem was extremely dangerous. But even though the golem unleashed a powerful attack, Zeke casually caught its fist with one hand, remarking that the creature was indeed tough. Because of the golem's hardness, Zeke quickly realized that he needed to use aura in order to gradually break through its defenses. With a swing of his arm as he pushed away the golem's fist, he commented that fighting and defeating the golem using normal methods would be too boring. Lika, exasperated, said that Zeke was always too reckless, while Rangus couldn't believe that Zeke actually found the golem boring to fight, considering their group had nearly died and struggled greatly against it. When the golem prepared to attack Zeke again, he immediately noted that because of its large size, the creature was definitely dangerous. Even so, he didn't hesitate to raise his arms and block the attack head-on, resulting in a powerful impact that shook the area. While defending himself, Zeke stated that the place was too dangerous, so they needed to move away. Lika's group immediately obeyed Zeke's order and hurriedly evacuated the battlefield. Once they were far enough, Zeke gathered momentum and threw the golem with tremendous force. As the creature crashed away, he remarked that its outer shell truly was extremely durable. While gathering aura into his fist and rushing forward, Zeke said he wanted to know if the inside of the golem's body was as tough as its outer shell. After leaping into the air, he declared that it was time to find out whether its interior was just as hard. He then activated the first form of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts Burst World, striking the monster and causing a massive explosion upon impact. In Zeke's mind, instead of dragging out the battle by slowly breaking through the golem's defenses, it was better to use Burst World to inject source power into the monster's body and destroy it from within. After confirming that his plan and attack worked, Zeke was overjoyed, saying that fighting this way made the battle far more enjoyable. Meanwhile, 1 month later, at the Eldragon State main building, Zeke was irritated as he questioned why he had been summoned and had his training interrupted. It was then explained that the 1-month exam at Poison Dragon Mountain had concluded safely. After the 3-star golem attack, no other serious incidents had occurred. The number of 7-year-old class members had dropped to 30% from the beginning, due to the harsh environment of Poison Dragon Mountain, but because they were exposed to constant danger and the brink of death, the remaining 30% of the 7-year-old class achieved good results and reached 1-star level. And after the exam ended, Zeke was directly summoned by Balza Eldragon of the Eldragon family. As they walked through one of the hallways in the main estate, Zeke asked what the family head wanted from him. Freya was displeased that Zeke referred to the family head simply as head, so she requested that he address the family head as Master Head, although Zeke argued that it was practically the same. In Freya's mind, the reason for the summons was already obvious, but she still explained that Zeke was called because of his behavior and actions during the exam, and that he had brought this upon himself. When Zeke asked if it was truly because of his behavior, Freya immediately confirmed it. She said that the purpose of the upperclassmen exam was for them to attack the lowerclassmen and steal their crystal orbs. But Zeke, a lowerclassman, did the opposite by attacking the upperclassmen, something they never expected. Freya added that because of Zeke, not a single upperclassman managed to steal a crystal orb from any lowerclassman, and so the upperclassmen had to retake the exam. Zeke argued that attacking upperclassmen wasn't forbidden, but Freya replied that no one would ever expect a lowerclassman to muster the courage to attack an upperclassman. Freya could only sigh, and as she turned away, she told him that his awful attitude needed to be corrected before he faced the Master Head. Once again, Freya reminded Zeke to fix his attitude and the way he spoke in front of the Master Head, especially when speaking directly to him. However, Zeke simply asked why, and Freya replied that even though he was still young, his terrible attitude could get him killed. She said she did not want to witness him being executed by his own father just because of his behavior. Zeke, on the other hand, only commented that if that were the case, then Balza was apparently quite violent. After they reached the door, Freya knocked immediately, and after addressing Balza as Master Head, introduced herself as a member of the Black Dragon Corps, Freya Winkik, and stated that they had come in response to the Master Head's summons. Balza then spoke in a serious tone, telling them that they may enter. After Freya opened the door and they stepped into the room, she immediately stated that she had brought Zeke according to the Master Head's orders. While Balza was still writing, he suddenly looked up at Zeke and seriously asked him why he had attacked the upperclassmen during the examination. Zeke fell silent for a moment, then said that everyone kept asking him the same repeated questions, so instead of answering, he decided to ask his father whether he was not allowed to attack the upperclassmen during the exam. When Balza asked what he meant by that, Zeke explained that the condition for passing the test was to survive in Poison Dragon Mountain for 1 month and keep their crystal orbs safe, and aside from that he had not heard of any other rules. Therefore, he simply followed the rules of the exam and used his time in whatever way he wanted while the test was ongoing. He added that if there were any prohibited actions during the exam, they should have stated them clearly before the test even began. Upon hearing Zeke's words, Freya felt intense fear and anxiety, and she immediately shouted, demanding to know what he was saying and why he was speaking like that in front of the Master Head. At that moment, Balza's eyes suddenly narrowed as he released his terrifying dragon aura, and because of the pressure from it, Freya collapsed to her knees, thinking that the Master Head's aura was so strong that it could kill Zeke. Contrary to her expectations, however, the protagonist remained standing, and Balza's pressure had no effect on him. On top of that, Zeke even told Balza to stop trying to intimidate him because it was becoming extremely annoying, causing Balza's expression to darken in both shock and irritation. While Freya was still kneeling, Zeke asked if Balza had really summoned him just to ask such meaningless questions. Balza then asked how Zeke had done it, but Zeke did not understand the question and inquired what he was talking about. Balza stated that according to the reports, Zeke had not only defeated the upperclassmen, but had even brought down a 3-star golem, and he also asked how Zeke was able to remain standing and calm in front of him after he released such intense pressure. He then seriously demanded to know how someone like Zeke, a mere child born out of wedlock, had obtained such incomprehensible strength and power. Zeke simply asked if Balza really wanted to know the reason for his strength, and said it was very simple, the only reason being that he was Zeke, which caused Balza to furrow his brows in frustration, while Zeke's gaze sharpened as he stood by his arrogant answer. After a moment of silent staring between them, Balza finally said that Zeke's personality really was as terrible as the reports claimed, yet he would still reward him for defeating the golem. Balza told him that he could choose what he wanted. Either take any single item from the dragon treasury, or gain access to the second floor of the dragon hall, which made Freya silently question what was happening, and why Balza was actually rewarding him. According to Freya, both the Dragon Hall and the Dragon Treasury were repositories of rare items collected by the Eldragon family for more than 1,000 years, beginning with the patriarch Gilfas Eldragon. She explained that the Dragon Hall contained various kinds of books, including those now considered forbidden techniques, while the Dragon Treasury held relics from previous family heads of the Eldragon family, including legendary weapons, spirit medicines, artifacts, and other items from different eras. These facilities also contained the secret treasures of the Eldragon family, which was why they were heavily guarded, and only a few people were given the opportunity to enter, as one had to demonstrate extremely excellent results to even gain access to the second floor or higher levels of the Dragon Hall. Freya could not believe that despite all the disrespect Zeke had shown to his father, Master Balza still considered him an outstanding child. Zeke then said that if Balza was going to give him a reward, there was no need to be stingy and make him choose, and asked why he could not just be given access to both the Dragon Hall and the Dragon Treasury. Balza, however, stated that he could only choose one, and then told them they could leave, but Zeke suddenly pointed at him, unable to believe that their conversation was already over, saying that he still had many things he wanted to say. This angered Freya, and she immediately grabbed Zeke by the collar, and while pulling him away cheerfully said that it was a great honor for him to receive a reward directly from the master head, adding that she now understood his orders and that they would be leaving. As she turned her back and dragged Zeke along, he said that if that was the case, there was just one last thing he wanted to say to Balza, and he stated that as long as Balza continued to kill off his own emotions the way he was doing, he would never become any stronger no matter what he did. Balza was shocked as he released his aura once more, only to find that his dragon aura had been suppressed by the protagonist's divine dragon. Freya, trembling, told Zeke to be quiet, and after they left Balza's room, the father of the protagonist remained silent, questioning to himself what kind of presence he had felt from Zeke. Meanwhile, as they exited the main hall, Freya shouted, asking what had been going through Zeke's mind and why he had been so rude to the master head, and asked if he had not listened to her warnings before they entered Balza's room. Zeke merely asked what she was talking about, saying that he had done everything he could to hold himself back so that he could behave properly in front of Balza, which made Freya ask if that really counted as him restraining himself, and why he could speak politely to the instructors and even to her, yet be so disrespectful to the headmaster. Zeke simply replied that Balza was his father, so the way he spoke to him was different. Because of Zeke's abilities and personality, Freya could only say that he truly was not an ordinary child, and asked who he really was. Zeke, however, asked if she was seriously questioning who he was, and as he always said, he was Zeke, which left Freya speechless. In her mind, all of them had drunk ancient dragon blood as infants, and they had no ability to defy the Master Head, because Balza possessed the power of the Dragon King, a superior species among all ancient dragons, and even Zeke should not have been able to oppose him. That was why she wondered what kind of child Zeke truly was, someone who could stand calmly in front of the Master Head. When Freya fell silent, Zeke asked if there was a problem, but she replied that there was none, while thinking that she needed to thoroughly investigate Zeke's birth records. She then asked which reward Zeke would choose, once again explaining that he could either enter the Dragon Hall up to the second floor, or enter the Dragon Treasury to take any item he wanted, but he could only choose one. When Zeke asked if he could have both, Freya said no, so he had no choice but to select the Dragon Hall, as it contained knowledge. Zeke then thought that he lacked understanding of the current era, and for now he wanted to learn about the new medicines and tools that had been created over the past 1,000 years, but he could only choose one. At that moment Rangus arrived, unable to believe that they would actually be allowed into the Dragon Hall of the Eldragon family. When Zeke asked if he was happy, Rangus immediately confirmed it and said that the Strike Dragon combat arts and Nurturing Dragon spear arts he had learned were already amazing, and now he would have the chance to learn even better martial arts from the Dragon Hall, adding that he could not believe they would receive such great rewards after passing the exam. Soon after, Laika also arrived, excitedly wondering how much knowledge she would be able to absorb before the time limit ended, and saying that she would need to read with all her effort. When Zeke asked if there was a time limit to their stay in the Dragon Hall, Laika replied that even though they could only enter the first floor, the basic rules were the same as the higher levels. She explained that each of them would be allowed to borrow one book from the Dragon Hall, but they could read as many others as they wanted, as long as their time had not run out, so managing their time inside would be extremely important. Zeke simply responded with an "I see." Laika then mentioned that she had heard Zeke had been given a choice for his reward, and asked why he had chosen the Dragon Hall instead of the Dragon Treasury, saying that based on what she knew about him, she thought he would choose the Treasury. Zeke replied that he had thought about it at first as well, but for now knowledge was more important to him. Upon hearing that, Laika said that the second floor of the Dragon Hall contained much rarer books than the first floor, especially when it came to martial arts, and that according to what she had heard, the difference in the quality of books between the floors was enormous. Even so, she said she believed there was no technique better than her lightning greatsword technique. Zeke, however, was simply staring at the Dragon Hall, causing Laika to ask whether he was even listening to her. When they finally arrived at the Dragon Hall, the Guardian announced that their time limit inside would be 5 hours, and reminded them to use their time wisely and to remain silent while inside. Zeke was unsure if 5 hours was considered long or short for them, but Laika said that it was already a generous amount of time compared to others who were only allowed 2 to 3 hours inside the Dragon Hall. She then said that the first thing they had to do was decide which book they wanted to borrow, and after that they should use the rest of their time to read as many other books as possible. Rangus mentioned that he had heard of talented people who could read multiple books at the same time, but his current goal was simply to find a martial arts book that suited him before their time ran out. After they entered the Dragon Hall, Zeke commented that finding the books that suited them and that they wanted to borrow would probably be difficult, while Rangus and Celine still could not believe that they were actually inside the Dragon Hall and that this was what it truly looked like. Zeke, on the other hand, said that the number of books in the Dragon Hall was even more impressive than he had expected, and he immediately smiled, excited about whether there was some new knowledge he could discover that might surprise him. At the moments after our protagonist finished choosing and reading some of the books he wanted to read, it was as if he had been struck by lightning from the shock, wondering what kind of new information he was discovering. With a mountain of books stacked in front of him and at his sides, Zeke still couldn't believe what he was reading about rifts, chaos, and magic. Because of the overwhelming amount of new knowledge he was uncovering, his mind struggled to process everything all at once. Eventually, Zeke simply lay down beside the books he had already finished, saying that the events of the past 1,000 years were terrifying, and more than anything, he still couldn't believe what had happened to their world within just 1,000 years, especially the fact that their world was now becoming connected to another world through rifts. According to the information he discovered, 900 years ago was the first time the dimensional wall was torn after a rift appeared. Beyond that rift lay a chaotic world now known as the Chaos Realm. In the Chaos Realm, monsters known as Chaos roamed freely, and there were also humans in that world who possessed powerful source power and continued to fight these chaos. After the Eldragon family learned about the existence of these people, they cooperated with them to fight against the chaos. Through the bond formed in war and their continuous battles against the chaos, 4 powerful female warriors from the other world eventually married into the Eldragon family. They were Typona, Fafnield, Levias, and Bahamut, founders of the 4 great Eldragon branch families that still exist to this day. Zeke's thoughts then drifted back to the anger boar he killed in the forest, the one covered in a strange black mist, as well as the lightning aura he recently saw from Lika. He admitted to himself that he truly knew nothing about any of those things, because both the strange black mist from the anger boar and Lika's lightning aura originated from the other world. But what truly caught his interest was magic, for to Zeke, it felt like an advanced form of technology brought by the people from the other world into their own. His eyes shone with excitement as he wondered where the books on magic might be, questioning why he couldn't find a single book that could teach him magic. Normally, such books would be placed near the history section, but then Zeke was startled when he suddenly heard a voice telling him to be quiet while inside the Dragon Hall. When he turned around, he noticed a golden aura in the darker area of the hall, and immediately wondered how it was possible for him to hear a voice, even though he sensed no presence. He also questioned whether it was truly just a voice, or if this was what they called magic, a technique capable of transmitting sound alone. As he looked up at the ceiling of the Dragon Hall, Zeke confirmed he still couldn't sense any presence aside from the source power he saw earlier. Then suddenly, the books in front of him moved. When the books floated into the air, Zeke was completely shocked and cried out in surprise, asking what was happening. But his eyes gleamed again when he realized something: the use of source power threads to manipulate objects and books. Excited, Zeke exclaimed how interesting that technique was. But when the mysterious voice once again told him to be quiet, Zeke grabbed one of the books mid-air, asking how he was supposed to stay quiet in front of something so fascinating, and demanded that the source of the voice show itself to him properly instead. However, the cloaked figure sitting on the upper floor of the Dragon Hall remained silent. After using their source power threads again, Zeke immediately froze when he realized his entire body was now bound. In the next instant, the mysterious cloaked figure threw him down to the first floor, saying that his time inside the Dragon Hall was over. After tossing him out of the hall's doors, Zeke tumbled across the ground and stabilized himself before landing properly, saying he had discovered yet another thing he didn't understand. As he stood up, he wasn't sure whether he was angry or simply excited by this new discovery, demanding that the cloaked figure show him clearly how the source power thread was used. But before he could continue, Rangus arrived, full of confusion, immediately asking Zeke what happened. Lika followed, asking what he had done inside the Dragon Hall for him to be forcibly thrown out. Zeke simply said he got a little too excited, then asked how things went for them if they found the books and techniques they wanted. Rangus confirmed this and said he borrowed a martial arts book called Cloud Water Spear Arts, adding that he thought he had learned a few simple techniques while inside. Celine said she also learned some techniques, and in addition, borrowed a martial arts book called Windflower Sword Arts. Reynald said he learned about the Eldragon-style Guardian Sword Arts inside, and the book he borrowed was also Eldragon-style, specifically about Guardian Shield Arts. Zeke greeted them awkwardly, thinking to himself that all the techniques they borrowed were ones he created in his past life as mere pastimes. When Zeke asked which book Lika chose, she happily said she picked the Heavy Wave Great Sword Arts, created by the first patriarch of the Eldragon family, Gilfus Eldragon. In the present time, It was known as the Heavy Wave Great Sword Arts revised and improved version by their 15th family head. She added that she also possessed their family's hereditary martial arts, so she could use the book for research. Zeke fell silent, thinking about how another one of his techniques had been revised by the 15th family head, just like his Dragon's Breath and Strike Dragon combat arts. He also remembered seeing many books in the Dragon Hall related to his other techniques from the past, but most of them now had improved versions placed alongside the originals. He wondered if the 15th family head was behind all those improved versions, finding the man more and more intriguing. When Zeke glanced back at the Dragon Hall, he thought that he originally assumed things would become boring after entering it, but now he could no longer wait for the next chance to go back inside. 5 years later, as Lika walked down a hallway, she suddenly stopped and wondered where Zeke and Rangus were. Just then, their classmates arrived and greeted Lady Lika, informing her that Lord Zeke and the others were currently at the training ground practicing. Again? Lika Typhona muttered before thanking her classmates. She was now 12 years old. When she arrived at the training ground, she immediately saw Rangus, Reynold, and Celine preparing to attack our protagonist Zeke, who was now also 12 years old. Meanwhile, in Balza's office, he received a report about the appearance of a special rift. When he asked the person on the other end whether the report was truly reliable, it was immediately confirmed. The man reporting was Ein, captain of the Black Dragon Corps, who stated that according to their investigation, there was roughly an 80% chance that water magic existed inside this newly appeared special rift. Balza responded that the location where the rift had appeared was an extremely troublesome spot, and he questioned why, out of all the places within their territory, the special rift had manifested there. Still, they could not afford to ignore it, as there was a high probability that magic water existed inside the rift. According to Balza, anyone who drinks magic water becomes a mage, because those who consume it gain a special constitution that allows them to convert source power into a different force known as mana. He further explained that the emergence of mana-based magic introduced entirely new techniques to the world, and at the same time sparked fierce territorial struggles over the sources of magic water, known as magic springs. In this age of magic, the number of mages directly determines a house's military strength. However, within Eldragon territory, not a single magic spring existed. For a house like the Eldragon family, which possessed no magic springs, there was only one way to obtain magic water: conquering special rifts. At present, the number of Eldragon mages was extremely small, and including Balza himself, all of them were hardened veterans who had obtained magic water through special rift conquests. Even so, in terms of sheer numbers, they were being overwhelmed by other houses that owned magic springs. For this reason, conquering special rifts was Eldragon's top priority mission. However, as Ein had reported, the location where the special rift appeared, the abundant dragon forest, was far too troublesome. There had even been a small border skirmish in the surrounding region just the other day. The abundant dragon forest was a vast woodland that lay mostly within Eldragon territory, but part of it stretched into the lands of another house. Those who claimed broader ownership of the forest and referred to it as the Great Abundant Forest were the Kerberos family. Ein added that the rift itself was certainly within Eldragon lands, but considering its scale and position, the special domain formed around it might extend into Kerberos territory. Knowing those mongrels, there was a high chance they would swarm toward it. Balza remarked that their noses were the only thing they were good for, and in any case, they would detect the special rift sooner or later. Thus, the Eldragon family had to prepare with a struggle against them in mind. Since it was a special rift, both sides would have limited options, but they needed to act before the Kerberos family caught on. With that decided, Balza immediately instructed Ein to inform all dragons' nests at once and announced that a selection exam would be held as soon as possible. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, Lika commented that Rangus and the others really went all out every time they trained with Zeke. In the middle of it all, Zeke remained calm as he waited for their attacks. As the three of them attacked Zeke simultaneously from different directions, Zeke's expression darkened as he strengthened his body and accepted all of their blows at once. With the sharp tip of Rangus's spear pressed and embedded into the hero's cheek, Zeke remarked that their coordination was good, but that Rangus was putting too much force into his spear, which ruined the true strength of spear arts. At the time, Rangus was 11 years old. As for Celine, who was 12, Zeke advised her that she focused too much on speed and the number of strikes, leaving no weight behind her attacks, and that she needed to find a proper balance. Raymond, who was also 12, was told by Zeke that his movements and use of the shield were good and correct, Even so, Zeke stated that all of them were still far too passive, and he told them to get more accustomed to attacking. Once again, he instructed them to come at him. As Rangus charged forward again, Lika remarked that watching their training was still completely insane. When Zeke asked what exactly she found so crazy about it, Lika replied that letting himself get hit bare-bodied without using source power was total madness. Zeke simply asked what she was talking about, and said that this was proper training for him. Shouting toward Lika, while flexing his muscles beneath his shirt, he told her that she should witness the fruits of his training. Zeke added that because of this training, his body had become sturdy even without source power. Lika complained that Zeke should at least have them stop attacking while they were talking, but at that very moment, Rangus delivered a powerful spear strike from behind Zeke. Rangus declared that Lika should look closely at his attack to see just how insane Zeke's body truly was. This caused Lika to shut her eyes and clutch her head, muttering that all of them were truly abnormal. Not only did Zeke refuse to use any bodily defense, but Rangus and the others continued attacking him with full force. Raymond suddenly asked how Zeke could possess such incredible defense without using source power, while Celine said that it was far too mysterious to be explained by the human body. Lika told them not to lump Zeke in with humans, because Zeke was not one of them. She then asked if they knew what the seniors used to call Zeke, and revealed that he was known as the Eastern Hall's demon child. This prompted Zeke to ask whether that title was meant as an insult, before questioning what Lika's purpose was in coming to see them and whether she wanted to join their training. Lika replied that training was fine, but there was something she wanted to tell Zeke first. When Zeke asked what it was, Lika said it looked like they would soon be seeing children from the other dragons' nests, and much sooner than expected. Rangus was visibly shocked by this, while Raymond commented that he had figured it would happen someday, though he hadn't expected it to be so early, and that it was finally time to meet them. When Selene asked if this was for the next test, Lika replied that even she didn't know the details. Zeke then asked where Lika picked up such rumors, to which she answered that she simply observed the instructors, their conversations, and their movements. Zeke said that he had never paid attention to such things, meaning gossip and rumors from instructors the way Lika always did. Lika responded that regardless, they needed to be careful, because the West Hall had that guy. By that guy, she meant one of the next head candidates besides herself and Zeke. Zeke merely said that now it sounded fun. A few days later, the students of the East Dragon's Nest were gathered in the arena, including several students who were being introduced for the first time. Zeke noted that everyone had been assembled in the arena without any distinction by grade, and Lika agreed, adding that, just as she had said before, they would meet students from other dragons' nests. After a short while, the students suddenly fell silent as Freya arrived and immediately ordered them to quiet down. Once the students were lined up before her, Freya announced that 3 days from now, they would be fighting the children of the other dragons' nests. Again, Freya announced that 3 days from now, they would be fighting the children of the other dragon nests, also known as the Dragon Halls. This immediately caused murmurs to spread among the students, as many of them could not believe that they would be facing students from other dragon halls this time. According to them, battles between students of different dragon halls usually only happened during graduation exams, so they could not help but wonder why such a fight was suddenly being held now. Freya explained that there were various reasons behind it, but she could not discuss the details yet. She then added one more thing she wanted to mention. Those who won these matches would be given a special mission. Upon hearing this, Zeke's eyes immediately lit up with excitement. He began to wonder if the special mission Freya mentioned would be worth fighting for, and in his mind, the situation was becoming more and more interesting. Freya then told the students that the matches would be elimination style, with 7 participants selected from each of the East, West, South, and North halls. She also said that the students themselves would decide who would compete, and that the selection had to be finished today. One of the upperclassmen asked Freya if those 7 fighters would be chosen only from among the upperclassmen. In response, Freya simply asked him what he thought was the reason she had gathered every student of their hall there, then stated that participants would be selected from all grades. This caused several upperclassmen to look slightly shocked, and they immediately began questioning what the lowerclassmen could possibly do against students from the other dragon halls. According to them, there was not a single lowerclassman capable of fighting on equal footing with the upperclassmen, as all lowerclassmen were weak beings. However, before leaving, Freya bluntly stated that she did not care either way, and that they should decide everything among themselves today. As soon as Freya left, one of the upperclassmen named Rick suddenly shouted, telling all the lowerclassmen to listen to him. He declared that the 7 fighters would be chosen from among the upperclassmen, and asked if any lowerclassmen had a problem with what he said. Lika immediately shouted back, saying that she did have a problem with Rick's decision. She stated that it was obvious they should also select from the lower classmen, because they had just as much right to participate in the battle. Rick looked at Lika with a mocking smile, and said that she seemed to be under some misunderstanding. What they were discussing, according to him, was everyone's ability. He added that no matter how noble Lika's bloodline was, in a contest of skill, it meant nothing. In response, Lika slowly walked toward Rick as her aura burst forth. As she revealed her 3 stars, she asked him if ability was truly what they were talking about when choosing who would fight the other dragon halls of the dragon nest. The upperclassmen were shocked, unable to believe that Lika was already at the 3-star level. Some of them had heard rumors that she was only at 2 stars, so they began questioning how this had happened. Lika merely said that she agreed with Rick's statement that strength and ability should be the basis for choosing who would fight the other dragon halls. She then loudly asked Rick if there were 7 upperclassmen stronger than her, and if not, then they should also select from the lower classmen. Enraged and irritated, Rick was unable to answer immediately, and eventually said that the only reason Lady Lika was stronger than the other upperclassmen was because her bloodline was special. Nevertheless, Rick insisted that aside from Lika, there was not a single lower classman capable of standing against the upperclassmen, calling them nothing but trash. At that moment, Zeke suddenly told him that he was too noisy. Rick, now furious at the protagonist, asked if Zeke could repeat what he had just said. As requested, Zeke mockingly repeated that Rick was too loud and annoying, causing Rick's anger to flare even further. Zeke then calmly asked Rick if he truly believed that all lower-classmen were weak beings and nothing but trash in the eyes of the upperclassmen. Rick fell silent in shock as Zeke's expression changed and his aura surged forward. Zeke asked if the upperclassmen would agree to everyone fighting each other until only 7 students remained. This made Lika immediately grab her head, saying that Zeke's suggestion was a huge problem. She also commented that his idea was far too violent. Lika then explained what she was trying to say instead. How about holding preliminaries for those who wanted to participate, allowing anyone who wished to compete in 3 days to join, regardless of grade? She asked the upperclassmen what they thought of her suggestion, adding that if they were confident in their abilities, there should be no problem. Rick agreed to Lika's proposal, even though he thought it would only be a waste of time, as they needed to focus on their training. As the upperclassmen turned away, Rick glanced back at Lika and Zeke. Lika then asked Zeke if he would join the preliminaries, and Zeke immediately confirmed it. He also said that Rangus, Selene, and Raymond should join as well. The 3 were slightly shocked, and Rangus quickly asked if Zeke was serious about making them join the preliminaries and fight the upperclassmen. Zeke confirmed it without hesitation. He said that they had been training with him all this time, and if they could not show the results now, then when would they ever be able to show them? Selene commented that the pressure of fighting upperclassmen was insane, while Raymond simply said that since Zeke had already decided, all they could do was give their best against the upperclassmen in the preliminaries. Lika then said that it seemed she would once again be fighting alongside her teammates, and she immediately asked the other lower-classmen if any of them also wanted to join the preliminaries. However, the other lower-classmen were too nervous, whispering among themselves and saying that they had no chance of winning against the upperclassmen, especially since there were 3-star levels among them. Hearing this, Zeke let out a sigh and asked his fellow lower-classmen why they lacked motivation. He told them that fighting stronger opponents was where they gained the most, and added that for now, he wanted to see the so-called abilities of their upperclassmen. After the upperclassmen took out their weapons, they spoke among themselves, saying that the selfishness of lowerclassmen these days was such a pain. No matter how hard the lowerclassmen tried, there was no way they could win against them. As Rangis and the others gathered together, trembling from the anxiety they felt about facing the upperclassmen, one of the upperclassmen mockingly said that they should go easy on the lowerclassmen. Another upperclassman laughed and agreed, adding that aside from Lady Lika, the lowerclassmen were all like babies, only at 2-star levels. Zeke noticed the reactions of Rangis and the others, so he asked them why they looked so gloomy and whether they were worried about the battle. Rangis immediately confirmed it, saying that their opponents were all 3-star upperclassmen, so it was only natural to feel worried. Zeke then reminded them that they had trained hard with him for the past 5 years and had done well in their training. Because of that, he said, they needed to have more faith in themselves. Selene and Raymond were immediately encouraged by Zeke's words and reminder, while Rangis still could not completely shake off the nervousness he felt about the upcoming fight. Suddenly, one of the upperclassmen shouted, telling them to stop chattering because they were just wasting precious time, and that upperclassmen did not have time to waste on lowerclassmen. He told them to hurry up and start the fight already, saying they would teach the lower classmen their proper place. However, in less than a minute, the spectators could not believe what they were witnessing, immediately questioning what was happening and how the lower classmen had managed to defeat the upperclassmen so easily. Some of those watching even wondered if the upperclassmen were really this weak this year, but others said it was not that the upperclassmen were weak, rather that the lower classmen they faced were simply monsters. Our protagonist wore a wide smile, clearly delighted by the result of the battle, and he immediately praised and congratulated Rangus and the others. In Zeke's mind, Rangus's deflection techniques and his eye for spotting openings had become much sharper. Celine was also handling the multi-strike windflower sword arts very well, and Zeke thought it was impressive how Raymond could smoothly switch between his shield and sword arts. According to Zeke, all of them had shown magnificent results from their training, and at this rate, if they gained confidence through real combat, it would only benefit them further. Zeke also thought that Lika had grown stronger as well, and with her lightning aura, she could defeat her opponents in a single attack. While the other upperclassmen were still in disbelief at the speed and ferocity of the fight they had witnessed, Lika commented that she believed it was only right to defeat her opponent decisively in order to teach them a lesson for their arrogance. However, Rick could not accept the result of the battle. According to him, there was no way 3-star upperclassmen would lose to 2-star lowerclassmen. At that moment, Zeke walked toward him and said that Rick was naive, because even after seeing the results with his own eyes, he was still spouting such nonsense. As Zeke approached Rick, he said that age and the number of stars were merely indicators, because in actual combat, the strong were simply the victors. Zeke added that if the upperclassmen were weak, then they would lose, and that was all there was to it. Rick suddenly pointed his finger at Zeke, shouting and calling him stupid. He insisted that the number of stars was equivalent to power, and asked if Zeke did not even know something so basic. Zeke calmly replied that whether Rick had stars or not, if his heart was destroyed, he would die all the same. Rick fell silent for a moment when Zeke told him not to lose sight of the essence of strength, because in combat, strength was simply whether one could win or not, and nothing more. Rick then shouted again, telling Zeke to shut up and demanding to know who Zeke thought he was. Rick said he was an upperclassman, so a brat like Zeke should not try to twist logic because it would not work on him. He added that he had been going easy on the lower classmen because they were just kids, but because of Zeke's words, it was now too late for Zeke to cry later, as he would not hold back anymore. Zeke simply replied that he was already tired of their war of words. He said that children should act like children and move their bodies before their mouths, and since only the two of them were left in the arena, he asked Rick to show the martial arts he had mastered and was so proud of, as well as how much he had trained. This only made Rick boil with rage, shouting at Zeke not to underestimate him. Rick immediately charged forward with his great strength technique, using all his power. However, before Rick's attack could even land, Zeke's eyes suddenly emitted a golden light, and with a single punch to Rick's face, Rick was sent flying across the arena. After that, Zeke even laughed, saying that Rick had indeed trained well. Because of Zeke's remark, the entire audience fell silent, as did Rick, who remained kneeling on the ground. Other students quickly agreed with Lika's comment that Zeke was truly ridiculous for saying Rick had trained well, because before Rick could even show the results of his training at the Dragon's Nest, he had already been defeated by Zeke. Meanwhile, at the West Hall training grounds, students could be seen groaning in pain, clutching various parts of their bodies from the injuries they sustained after the battle. After letting out a deep sigh, one man said that every single one of them was useless. This man was one of the candidates for the next family head, Vanille Fafnilde El Dragon. Soon after, other students arrived, and one of them addressed him as Lord Vanille, reporting that the selection here was already complete. This man, Alan, Vanille's right-hand man, was a 3-star level, and behind him were the other 3-star students who had passed the selection, including Retin, who was only 12 years old. Vanille immediately noticed Retin and called him over, asking if he was truly already a 3-star level, despite being a lower classman. When Retin confirmed it, Vanille praised him, saying that he liked competent people like Retin. Vanille added that if Retin proved useful, he would make him one of his subordinates. Retin immediately bowed and thanked Vanille, thinking to himself that Lord Vanille had acknowledged his strength, and that with Lord Vanille here, there was no way the West Hall would lose to the other halls. Retin also believed that if they achieved great results in the special mission, Lord Vanille would become the next head of the Eldragon family, and when that happened, he would become a direct subordinate of the family head. Alan then stepped closer to Vanille and said there was something he needed to inform him about. When Vanille asked what it was, Alan whispered that apparently Lady Lika would be participating in the East Hall's selection team. This made Vanille scratch his head in irritation, and with annoyance clearly visible on his face, he said that Lika was an endlessly annoying pest to him. He then stood up and said that it did not matter, because no matter how excellent Lika was, they would be the ones to win. Vanille declared once more that they would win and complete the special mission, and prove to his older brothers that the seat of the next family head truly belonged to him. If you enjoyed this chapter and want to see what happens next, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next update in this epic story.